discussion, could we have a motion to the agenda as presented? Ken? Any discussion? Seeing none, call the question. Those in favor? Those opposed? Carried. So first item up, when do you Gary's report right now? You want to wait?
Sorry.
You go. It's a Gary or Larry question, probably.
Yeah, Gary, you're there.
Oh, thank you.
Okay.
We don't care, so just when do you come up?
I will.
Okay, Gary, then Larry.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So if you turn to page 1 and 2, we have some information there on the Agriculture Service Board Summer 2 report. So executive summary, that on May 16, 2019, council meeting, Councilor Horvath moved that Lethbridge County host the 2021 Agriculture Service Board Tour, and further that administration bring back information. So that's what we're here for today. And looking into this, 2021 and 2022 have already been spoken for Brazeau County and Wheatland County. So the next feasible opportunity to host the tour would be, I believe, 2023. Previous direction, we've shown interest a few times in the past on hosting this tour. Never worked out. Last time I brought a report was in 2015. I was also asked last year to look into bringing some information to senior staff, which I did that time as well. So, and the last time we did host this tour was in 2002. It was a good event back then. So a little background, as you guys know, the Ag Service Board Tour is held somewhere in the province each year if someone is willing to do so. So unfortunately, in 2019 and 2020, nobody stepped up, so those ones are void. Past budgets have ranged from 220 to 300,000. There's a big variance on budget amount. Some of these RMDs have owned their own facilities, so that obviously helps out Brooks and Grand Prairie, I believe, has some of their own facilities. And it depends as well on entertainment. Entertainment can be very expensive. Terry Clark was at that one for months. So normally 400 people attend. That includes delegates, partners, and youth. And in recent years, income generated with registration has fell short. So there is some losses that most counties do take on. So, and as well, most of the people I've consulted with, I've looked at most of the past tours, and have also talked to the next two, Wheatland and Brazeau as well. Most have hired a tour coordinator, which they have considered to be a must in that position for a year or a year and a half. So the good thing is, Lethbridge County, we have a lot of agriculture and a lot of things going here, and we would have a lot to showcase that, it's for sure. So alternate analysis is that we ought to host the tour, or you team up with another municipality. I know my personal thoughts on another municipality. It's good to do it yourself, and you're in control if you're going to do that, right? And so then now, financial implications. I've estimated about $100,000. That's if you hire a tour coordinator, and then incur somewhat of a loss of maybe $50,000. So coordinator would be for, like I say, a year and a half. Lots of things. The numbers can change depending on attendance and sponsorships. So I do have numbers from other MDs. I'm not comfortable to spell them out here. I think we feel like going camera to get some of the other numbers.
Sure. So we would need a motion to move into camera.
Probably hard to answer, just given how there was not any interest for 2 years. But how far in advance would you suggest you would have to make it known your intention to want to host in 23 or pick a year, I guess?
Realistically, I think if we took this back in a later date after the election in 2021, there's probably gonna be somebody already taking 2023. You might get it at 2024 is what I'm thinking, or you could have a lull, with the economy going a little slower, there could be some open doors as well. We're seeing more open and it's harder to attract students.
So, if I may,
Go ahead, Morris.
so 22 is taken already?
2021 and 2022 were taken. The earliest feasible that signed up today would be 2022.
So that,
Right now.
yeah, okay. So I feel that's, we never have to have for 23 and commit to that for 23. Thank you.
Steve?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I haven't been on a summer tour yet. Is there MLAs, is there private businesses on there, or is it just municipal elected officials?
There are some MLAs at times, I get Ian Donovan back then. It is mostly elected officials for other municipalities. And you see the same municipalities going every year. Some don't go, some do. Usually end up with 110.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's a good question, Steve. A lot of times the businesses what they're hosting part of the tour or whatever down there, they seems to participate quite a bit for the rest of the tour too. So there's always businesses on that tour too.
Hey, just to follow up on that, if we want to showcase the region as an economic driver for the region, a tour for municipal elected officials, I don't see that as a return. If we want to bring in businesses in the future, we should be touring MLAs, we should be touring prospective businesses. But that way there's gonna be a return on the investment here. Here it's just, I think it's just money out the window.
Ken?
Yeah, we've got a long period of time to pick the right dates. And as for entertainment, there's a lot of entertainment in this area too, right out of the city. So that's probably lost. But the biggest thing is to pick the best date that you're not running into anything bigger than that's the change, or would, like the exhibition board and catering.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I just want to echo what Steve said. I haven't been on the summer tour either, but I just have to agree with what he said. I think if we're looking at what we can do here and what we can promote ourselves, I think a good example is last year I was able to go on the Sustainable Ag Tour that Dwayne hosted last year in the fall, and I thought that was fantastic. You know, a smaller group, more just a small group that you were able to have a more intimate setting. And and I'm not saying that this isn't something we shouldn't look at, but I'd like to see something like that. I think if we were to support that maybe a little more and give more resources to something like that, where we could, could host more industry, elected officials from the provincial or even the federal government for that matter, and do something like that. And then have, maybe a smaller setting and a little more control. I think that's a great opportunity that we're already doing. So maybe just a thought there. Thank you.
So I completely understand what you're both saying. I think it's kind of two different things, so, like if you're gonna attract business, you don't want a whole big group of people there to observe what you have either, or what you're offering. I think you just need the people who are interested in developing a business, but you also need the government people there to see what they're gonna fund, or if they're gonna be able to help us out in any way, shape, or form. So I think a smaller tour for that is way better off to get that job done. Morris?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I hear you guys, but we're doing that already anyways. This is something you should step up to the plate to do provincially. And talking about MLAs, I'm sure if you put a little bit of effort into, inviting the right MLAs to come over there and join the tour, they'll be there too. And this is a totally different thing than what we're doing already. The one in the fall, yes, that's a fantastic one, but we should step up to the plate for this one too, because it's provincially and we can do a lot of promoting down there and maybe bragging rights or whatever else. But the MLAs, they certainly would be down there. You tell them you must be there.
Wait,
Mr. Chairman, in talking to some of the municipalities that, just doing some research on this, basically what some of the bigger ones said, they put away $100,000 a year. They knew they're 3 years in advance, and they put $100,000 away a year, saving up for the event. And then from my perspective, I believe if we do have the tour, we include economic development in Lethbridge, right? Because we're promoting this area, and it could be a vacation for whoever comes to the event. They could spend a week or better. It's an opportunity for them to come and see what we're doing down here. My tour is on September 17th, I believe, so I'll put that plug out there. But yeah, I mean, it's doable, but I think that you involve the city as well, because we're using their hotels, we're using a lot of their infrastructure. I believe that you could get them on board and we could reduce some of our costs, right? I believe that, right? But that's my perspective.
okay, any other comments?
So I'll carry on for the reasons for recommendations before I get to the recommendation. So there is a municipal election scheduled for 2021, and there's a possibility, of course, for council turnover. So with the amount of work and financial commitment that's involved in this tour, it's being advised to have those who will be involved at that time to make the decision. So now, going back to the recommendation, what I have here is that Lethbridge County review the possibility of hosting an agriculture service board tour after the 2021 municipal election.
Any comments? I don't really agree with what you're saying, because if you're gonna do it, you should get on and do it. Because, every council that comes along is gonna have a different line of thought. If you're gonna do it, you might as well be in the process of starting it if you're even interested.
That is a very good point, because, if you go after 2021, if you want to do it, there's going to be somebody already locked in for 2023 likely.
How firm, sorry, Gary, how firm are those two that are in 2021 and 2022? They've
They're
committed?
hosting, they've committed, they,
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? Ken?
I would suggest that we should probably try to book 2023. That'll give us enough time to put everything together, and it doesn't matter whose council's going to be, everything will be the same anyway.
We're moving that?
Yes.
Any discussion? Morris?
I would like to see the possibility come out of that. We just should say 23 we're hosting, we're hosting. That's what I like to see.
But isn't that what it says?
Yeah. Oh, it says the possibilities.
No.
Oh, it's not, oh, that's gone now. Okay. Yeah, that's gone now. Lorraine had it up there for a while.
Changed it.
She was
Any other
Sydney
questions?
sends things faster than I can see.
Any other questions? If not, I'm gonna call the question. Those in favor? Those opposed? Carried.
Thanks, Gary.
Thank you very much, Gary. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Gary, we'll touch base to get this rolling.
For sure.
Okay.
Let's go down to G1, bylaw 19-026, intermunicipal subdivision development appeal board, pages 47, 61. Go ahead, Larry, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, council. The executive summary is that Lethbridge County does have an opportunity at this time to join the Chinook Intermunicipal Subdivision and Development Appeal Board, which was created by the Old Man River Regional Services Commission, otherwise known as ORS, as a service to their membership. Previous council direction and policy on this is that bylaw 1457, the SDAB board bylaw adopted by council on December 2015 is still in place and is what we currently use to govern and manage our appeals. At the June 6, 2019 council meeting, there was a motion approved by council that Lethbridge County join the CISDAB. Boards created this at the request of a number of their members to address changes made to the Municipal Government Act. Attached to this report, we do have a draft bylaw number 19-026 for the CISDAB. It includes a fee schedule as well as the agreement that Lethbridge County would sign with ORS if approved. The proposed bylaw provides details on how the board will function, and some specifics to Lethbridge County in particular would be that Lethbridge County would and could appoint 3 members to this particular board, and an appeal in Lethbridge County would be heard by a panel of 3 board members, whereas currently it's 5, so a smaller working group, more like a tribunal kind of setup. With regards to appointing members to the new appeal board, the county, again, can have up to 3 members, doesn't have to have 3. We're recommending 3. It is recommended that the members be selected from the 5 existing Lethbridge County appeal board members. They're all citizens at large, and all of the current board members have completed the required training as per the changes that were made in the MGA last year. Of the current board members, 1 of their terms will be ending in 2019. 1 of them will be ending in 2020, and the remaining 3 are scheduled to end in 2021, so 2 more years. We reached out to the 5 board members currently in place, and 4 of them expressed interest in continuing on with the new board. 1 of them we were unable to establish contact with. We did try a few different avenues at a few different times and heard nothing, or didn't get a response. The term of the selected appeal board members would follow the current term they are on with new appointments staggered to ensure a mix of new and experienced board members. We've actually had a look at that and have a little bit more information to add since we made this report, Mr. Chairman. With respect to alternatives and analysis, County Council could stay with the existing SDAB board structure. The level of service we receive from ORS would not change if the county chose to go that route. With respect to financial implications, joining the new Chinook Intermunicipal SDAB would cost the county $500 per year to ORS, in effect a retainer, and the cost per appeal hearing would be reduced because there would be fewer board members, so we'd be paying fewer per diems or less per diems for 3 versus 5 under the current structure. I'll go to our recommendations in just a moment, and the reasons for those recommendations are that there would be efficiencies realized by joining the Chinook Intermunicipal SDAB while maintaining the existing level of service provided by ORS. We have attached the bylaw 19-026, Chinook Intermunicipal SDAB, the agreement for the Chinook Intermunicipal SDAB, which again we would have to sign, and a schedule of fees for the Chinook Intermunicipal SDAB. If you look just quickly on page 49, towards the bottom there's a little chart that shows the per diems that would be paid under this new structure. You can see that preparation time for a member attending a hearing would be for up to a 2-hour block, $50. Currently, there's nothing in the bylaw and there's no fee structure in place so that any members making preparations to sit at a hearing are compensated for that directly. Kind of on the flip side of that, if you will, a half day for a 4-hour block or less, the member would be paid $100. Currently, they're paid $153. And for a full day, 4 hours or more, would be paid $200 under this new structure, whereas currently they're paid $306. So I suppose you could kind of look at it that the preparation time of $50 for a 2-hour block somewhat at least maybe compensates or offsets the reduced compensation that would be in place under this new agreement. With respect to mileage, it remains the same, and it's the Canada Revenue Agency rate of 58 cents per kilometer at this time. The motions that we are recommending to council, and there are several here, are first of all, that bylaw 1457, the existing Lethbridge County SDAB bylaw, be rescinded to make room for the new bylaw, and that new bylaw be read a first and second time, and if there is unanimous agreement to proceed to considering third reading, that council go in that direction as well and consider giving third reading to an adoption of the bylaw today. The final piece would be that the county appoint 3 citizens at large to the Chinook Intermunicipal Subdivision and Development Appeal Board, and that the citizens at large be chosen from the current SDAB board members. And the final thing maybe I'll say here, Mr. Chairman and Council, is that with respect to that, because we're considering people for an appointment, an award, a position, some sort of benefit, you could argue, from the county, under Section 19 of the Freedom of Information Protection or Privacy Act, I would suggest that when we get to that, if we go that far, that we move to a closed meeting so that we can kind of openly discuss the merits of who should be looked at to maybe be appointed to that board. And then when we go back into the open meeting, if there's agreement, make that resolution in an open meeting. So that's the report, and you will notice that behind me here is our subject matter expert from ORSC, Steve Hardy. And I may be able to answer some questions as there may be. If we get down into more detail, Steve is, again, subject matter expert, and I'm sure he was a key part in drafting this bylaw and this whole arrangement, and he can probably answer just about any question that anyone can come up with. So, thank you.
Thanks, Larry. So I have a couple of questions that come right up my way. I wasn't quite sure, did you say this would only be a 3-member body?
That's correct.
So if we have a hearing for an appeal within our municipality, none of our members would attend that hearing. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, our members could, and it would be up to us. And in our discussions with Steve, he said that if council chose, we could offer those 3 members the first opportunity. Maybe 1 or 2 of them wouldn't be available that particular day or whatever the case. So then they would go into that larger pool. And so we would almost certainly always be assured of being able to get 3 members, whether they're directly from the county or from other municipalities.
So then I guess that kind of thinking about that, I don't quite follow the purpose of this if you're gonna pick your own 3 to hear a hearing in your own municipality. Like, because right now, I mean, they're the ones who hear a hearing in our municipality, as the members we've appointed. So for just appointing, we're just going down in size and decreasing their wages. I'm really not sure if we're gaining anything by actually doing that.
No, good points. I can make some comments. Maybe this is with your permission, Mr. Chairman, an appropriate time for Steve to share some of the kind of rationale or philosophy behind that and flesh it out a little bit better.
Okay.
Steve, Steve.
Yeah, that's a good question, Mr. Chair. That part, we're customized, it's totally up to the municipalities. The individual municipalities have an appeal of how they want the members appointed to sit on the panel to hear an appeal. Most, and we're just keeping a spreadsheet, so when an appeal comes in, we can look to see what the composition will be. But so most of the municipalities have joined so far have indicated they would like one of their members to sit to hear an appeal, and then from there pull from the regional type of thing, whatever like that, one of the representatives. As well, most have indicated, and we're leaving this up to the prerogative of the municipality too, of how you'd like us to do it. You can give us that direction, is that they'll say after you pick our one member to sit, then if that's confirmed, then pull from the closer region. So for this Lethbridge County, for example, they'll say, okay, pick a member from Colehurst or from Coaldale or for Picture Butte to come to sit, type of a thing. And if they're not available, then kind of move further out, type of a thing, whatever. But I don't think, I think we've had one municipality that said try to have two of their members sit and then pull a third from the panel. But we do have a number of municipalities as well who've only appointed one member. They have appointed three, or they've got a couple small places like Barron's who are having trouble appointing somebody. So they're relying on the other municipalities of members appointed, which is kind of the regional aspect, that they'll just pull from the pool of whether it's Picture Butte or Noble for Lethbridge County to sit to hear their appeals, because they don't have anybody appointed and they have trouble getting people to come forward to sit on such a board because of their size and that sort of thing. But so it is that part we're leaving to the municipalities, but like I say, most have indicated try to pick one of ours that we have appointed and then go to the pool from there, whatever. So it's designed so it's flexible based on that and on how the municipalities' wishes are on that. I think I say we have one municipality that said pick our three first, and if they're not available, then go to the pool. So you might get one, or depending on the date and that, whether their people are not available or not, type of thing. But different municipalities think different, have different approaches. But I say it's designed so it's flexible on that to what your wishes are of how you want your composition.
And
Just further to that, was the idea behind that, Steve, so picking one member that was familiar with the municipality, there'd be some familiarity, but then picking the rest for the appeal, so there's diversity? Is that where the thinking was?
That's right, yeah, so maybe get a different flavor, a different thought from somebody from a different municipality, type of a thing. We've had, I think, four, I remember something like 4 appeals so far with the regional board. We have another 5 on the go over the next 2 or 3 weeks. I think we're on 8 or 9 that have been commenced. And so far, I helped on one out of Colehurst, and in that Colehurst one, we had a member of Colehurst sit on there, and a member from Coaldale, and then the member from Picture Butte, who actually is your own employee, Gary Seacrest, sits, he's appointed, Picture Butte appointed him, he did a fine job. So they had that type of composition for Colehurst, but anyways, the panel worked very well, and they were very thorough in looking at the bylaws, that type of thing. But yeah, sometimes you have the outside people too, they, I guess because they are going into another municipality and trying to represent municipality as the board member, they seem to be paying attention to reading the bylaws and that sort of thing to become familiar with the material. So those ones that we've seen that kind of composition, it's so far seemed to work very well. They've been very good boards so far with those types of composition. So
so another question then, if they have a hearing, and it takes a day to get all the information in, and then how long do they have to make a decision? Still the same kind of time frame? And do they get paid for the days when they come to make a decision?
Yeah, Chair, so usually, so once an appeal is filed, that there has to be a hearing within 30 days. Once that hearing occurs, once the board closes the hearing, they have 15 days to within render a decision in writing. So that part's still the same. The typical practice is, and this happens in 99.9% of the time, is that they'll have the hearing on the day it's scheduled. It may go, depending on the matter, anywhere from 1 to 2 hours typically. And then the board usually closes the hearing, and then they'll stay immediately, and might take an hour or maybe 2 hours, typically an hour, but they'll deliberate right afterwards, give their direction to the clerk of what they want their decision to be, what the reasons for the decision are, type of a thing. And they'll do it immediately after the hearing, and then go off. Us at Orska, the clerks will write it up, and a matter of days or a week later, however long it takes, depending on our schedule, we'll send it out to the board members for them to review, and they'll usually within a day or two just say, yeah, that's our decision, that's fine, you can release it, or the chairman can sign on our behalf, type of a thing. So we very rarely have appeals where they come back on another day to deliberate. I can think maybe of 2 in 20 years. One was on a landfill at Willow Creek, and one was on a wind farm in Pincher Creek, where the hearings went all day. They had 100 people show up, and the board had to come back the next day to deliberate, make their decision, kind of thing, because they're tired after hearing people all day, and they didn't want to make it that night because they thought they might make a bad decision because they were burnt out. But typically, like I say, depending on the matter, hearing might last, an hour or 2, then the board stays for an hour afterwards to decide. So it's usually done, right afterwards, type of a thing. So usually just a half day, in most cases per diem applies. Maybe if it's a long appeal, you might get a full day, but that's 99% of the time, that's usually the case.
Gotcha.
Any other questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sorry to put you on the spot, but just for reference, how many hearings have there been in Lethbridge County over the last? I can only recall one on my time in council. Was there possibly 2? I'm just trying to think.
Over the last year, I think over the last year might have 1. It fluctuates from years to years. Typically, the last 2 years have been probably a little bit more quiet. Typically, there's probably 5 to 6 a year, something like that, like a half dozen. Years back, and that kind of fluctuates too, depending on the economic activity. So the more permits you issue, more subdivisions, usually there's more appeals as well. Years back, around that 2008, 2010, we were having 12 to 15 appeals in a year. I'd say these last couple of years, it's been a little bit less, whatever. So yeah, kind of fluctuates, but.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Just to embellish that a little bit and confirm what Steve's response to Councillor Campbell was. In 2015, when we redid the SDAB bylaw, we did look at the historical average because it's kind of relevant. People want to know what they might be looking at, how many times a year typically they could expect to be called out. And I think we were somewhere between 6 and 7, and we went back several years and just added them all up, did the simple math divided by the years, and it's right in that sort of half dozen zone. And as Steve said, it's been a little bit quieter lately since this council has been in office, but I could change on a whim. It's really hit and miss. Thanks.
Well, I know we used to have a lot of them when we gave out the intensive livestock operation permits. That was probably more than 15 a year at times. And some of those were very lengthy. Remember the one you had at the public library? What was that, 2.5 days?
The law, we had to use one of the boardrooms.
Oh, yeah. Morrison.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've been hit up, last week, I think it was, by a ratepayer in the county close to Picture Butte down there, and he says, well, his comments were that he is totally against it because he said what we do in there, opening up the door to a lot of bureaucracy, for one, and the other one is the cost. And I told him that, you know, we discussed it quite a bit, and actually the cost will be going down. And talking about bureaucracy, I said we had a few of them down there. We turned down at council level, and then they went to the appeal board, and the appeal board pushed it through. And I think we know somewhat, you know, why that happened, because it was somewhat self-interest down there, or a friend, or whatever down there. And so I think, you know, if you go regional, you're gonna eliminate all of that. And I tried to explain that to the person as good as possible, and well, he basically told me that I was totally wrong, but anyways, I feel too that the regional is probably gonna be better for the appeals what's gonna come forward to be handled the way on the regional scale. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Steve?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, maybe just to reiterate, I mean, the bureaucracy, but all municipalities have to have an appeal board. So whether you're part of the regional or not, you just keep the one you have to have one regardless. All municipalities have to have an appeal board. It's a requirement under the Municipal Government Act. And go back to the regional idea here was, I said really it started from a number of the member municipalities asked for it, and the biggest reasons are that the members have to be trained now, take the provincial training, and with that, not only with the provincial training, but a lot of municipalities, some of them were struggling to find not only qualified people to sit on the board, but just a warm body to sit on the board. A lot of them were having trouble if they had a 3-member panel or a 5-member panel of getting people to come forward to sit. Just a lot of people weren't volunteering for that. So with the regional here, having to take the training and all that, the idea hopefully is that you'll have members that sit more frequently, and maybe the number of different municipalities to get a perspective of what goes on in other municipalities and how bylaws work, so that they're more experienced, and from the more experience you get better appeal board decisions with a more experienced panel from a number of areas. So that was kind of the idea, I guess, that the municipalities came forward wanting to create this regional board, is to have a bigger pool of experienced people to draw from and hopefully make the good decisions on the municipality's behalf.
I mean, to me, I can see the advantage of it in some cases, but I guess you're asking people to get trained up to do an important job, and I really think that the pay listed on page 49 doesn't really meet the job you're asking them to do, so I would be opposed to it. Steve?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If we were to reduce them, like the plan is to reduce by 2, there's one term is up in 2019 and 2020. Could we just let those run out, and then 2021 we'd have our 3? Would that be a way to go?
If that was your desires to do it that way, Len says he'd be open to having you pass the bylaw like that in order to start with the 5 and reduce it, if that's your preference, knowing that those terms are coming up here shortly, next 6 months and a year or so, whatever. So if that's your wish, and you wanted to amend the bylaw like that, this is your bylaw for your board. The limit of the 3 was an attempt to that, just to try to limit the pool somewhat, because if everybody appointed 5, then we'd have 100 members on the regional appeal, and that would be too large, realistic of a working group type of thing. So
Okay, that helps answer that then.
as well, Mr. Chair, if I could mention too, the per diems and that sort of thing too, for the meetings or that, those figures came from, there was a, working advisory group, of a number of CAOs, in Southern Alberta who met to discuss that and was actually a part of that advisory group. And I think they just looked at the area and what the different municipalities were paying, for their per diems and their meeting fees, whatever. And, the figures that are in there, I don't know if that was the average or the most agreeable or whatever, but, they looked at the municipalities in Southern Alberta, what the various municipalities were paying, or if that, so maybe Lethbridge County was paying a bit more than what some of the other municipalities paid for their regional appeal boards. I'm assuming whatever, but that's the figures that the advisory committee, agreed on, whatever, that as the regional board, that they're all agreeable to, wherever those numbers came from.
So, yeah, I certainly understand where you're coming from on that, but did the members who actually sit on an appeal board have any input on it? No, you don't have to answer it, because I already know the answer. So that's why I'm opposed to it, and I won't vote for it. So, anybody else got any comments? Yep, go ahead, Bart.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think this is a great opportunity. I love the regional model. I think it could be a great asset and something really good for the county. So I'd like to make the motion to rescind bylaw 1457.
Mr. Chair. Yeah,
I don't have that on my list.
I have a question.
Okay, sorry.
Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If the bylaw 1457 is to be rescinded, perhaps we could rescind policy 178 as well, that deals with SDAB remuneration. Thanks.
So what was the second one you said?
Policy 178.
178?
Yeah, that, the title is SDAB remuneration policy 2019,
Okay.
because it's covered in the agreements.
Yeah. Please don't have that one. Any discussion on that motion? I'm gonna call the question. Those in favor? Those opposed? Carried. Anyone wishing to move bylaw 19-026 to be first read? Steve?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll move bylaw 19-26 to be read for the first time.
Just for clarification, did you want that clause put in there for the term to run out? Or
No,
just?
just the way it was written or presented was good.
Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion? Call for the question. Those in favor? Those opposed? Carried. Second reading for second time. Dory? Any discussion? Call for the question. Those in favor of second, those opposed? Carried. And consider third reading of bylaw 19-026.
I move that.
Call for the question, those in favor. Those opposed? It is carried, but we can't go to third reading. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Stay there, you guys, because we have, we might as well do it while Steve's still here.
22 would be the next one up. Sickhurst Ventures Limited, the Coaldale Solar Project, approval and request of waiver of section 15 of the bylaw. And that is on page 73 to 79.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On May 31st this year, the Alberta Utilities Commission, AUC, approved the Coaldale Solar Project, which puts Lethbridge County in a position that it is essentially obligated to approve any required land use bylaw amendments and development permits required for this solar project to move forward. Assestes Ventures Limited has submitted a letter requesting that the county council waive the 18-month timeframe from which the same application may be brought forward to council. Previous council direction and policy bylaws 18023 and 18024 were proposed amendments to the land use bylaw for the purpose of redesignating 2 80-acre parcels from rural agricultural to direct control to allow for solar collection facilities to be constructed. So, as noted, both of those bylaws were defeated back on December 6th last year, which, had they passed, would have allowed the 2 solar collection facilities to be constructed. But since the AUC has approved the Coaldale Solar Project, it allows that project to proceed, notwithstanding County Council's decision. Council is, again, now required to approve the required land use bylaw amendments as per section 619 of the Municipal Government Act, and we'll have a closer look at that maybe in just a moment. To accomplish this, County Council must, however, first grant a waiver of the 18-month time frame between applications, and that's right out of Lethbridge County's land use bylaw section 53, and then be ready to rehear the redesignation application once it's submitted. The applicant is required to resolve the conflict between their proposal and the fact that the land use bylaw currently doesn't allow what they're proposing to do. As such, Assestes Ventures is required to reapply to redesignate the 2 parcels in question, so essentially the same application that was turned down by council late last year. And once they've done that, and eventually, if we get to that point where it's approved, a development permit application can be submitted, reviewed, and a permit eventually issued by Lethbridge County. County administration discussed the matter with Assestes Ventures, and to move forward with the solar project, the following is required: that they provide a letter requesting a waiver of section 53 of the land use bylaw, that is that 18-month time limit or time period, and then as well to waive the application fees. As well, they need to submit an application to amend the land use bylaw from the current zoning of rural agricultural to direct control, which would be brought forward to county council in August 2019. And then eventually they would need also to submit a development permit to the Development Authority for review and approval with conditions. Alternatives and analysis council, although it does say must, but may still refuse or accept the request. A refusal could result in a legal challenge by the applicant. And we can go into that a little bit if we need to. There are questions. Financial implications, administration time, of course, is needed to process any land use bylaw amendment. However, this is a very unique situation in the Municipal Government Act because there's a kind of a higher body making the ruling that this project is approved to proceed. A public hearing is not required, despite the fact that it is a land use bylaw amendment, and I think we're all used to seeing a public hearing during any land use bylaw amendment. So there would be no advertising fees with that. The reason for the recommendation is that the Municipal Government Act essentially requires council to approve the land use bylaw amendment within 90 days of submission. Page 75, Mr. Chairman, I'll just point out, is that letter from Assestes Power requesting respectfully to council that the 18-month waiting period to reapply for the rezoning designation be waived, and as well that the application fees be waived for the resubmission. The next page, page 76, just outlines that procedure in our land use bylaw whereby any member who has had a land use bylaw amendment denied can reapply unless, or ask council to waive that 18-month period so that they can reapply in a shorter period of time. And then I think, to me, what sort of stands out as I reviewed the legislation here a little bit is on page 77. If you look down, kind of in the center of the page, section 619, subsection 2, you can just have a quick read of that or review of that if you want, but when an application is received by a municipality for a statutory plan amendment, land use bylaw amendment, as is the case here, and the application is consistent with a license, permit, approval, or other authorization granted by a number of bodies, including the AUC, then it says that next line, the municipality must, so not optional, but must approve the application to the extent that it complies with that license granted or that permit granted by the AUC. So the way I read it, it really does tie council's hands, but ultimately council is a separate decision-making body, and you know, nobody can force really physically, you know, a council member to raise their hand in favor of something if they feel strongly that it shouldn't be approved. But again, I think that would really open a can of worms, and we did have some discussion with Steve Hardy, who's had more experience in these things over the years, and I believe the position was that he wasn't particularly aware of any council in this situation who has denied that land use application after it's been approved by a body like the AUC, as laid out in the local government, or pardon me, the Municipal Government Act. So that's where we're at. With respect to recommendations, Mr. Chairman, it is recommended that County Council grant a waiver of the 18-month time limit in section 53 of the land use bylaw, and a waiver of the application fees for assessed ventures in order to comply with the policies of the Municipal Government Act, section 619. Thanks.
Thank you, Larry.
You're welcome.
Any questions? Go ahead, Norm.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to administration, I know at the last meeting, Hillary had noted that with AUC's decision, there were no comments. Has there been any follow-up, and is there any opportunity for us to get anything further from the AUC on this decision?
Yeah, if I may, Mr. Chairman, through to Councillor Campbell's question, they were very slow in responding. Our senior planner reached out through a few emails and phone calls to the AUC, and there was silence. You know, maybe people were out of the office, or who knows, but eventually did connect with them. But they didn't provide, you know, much guidance other than to say, you know, they've made their decision, and it's now up to the applicant, the Assessed Ventures, and Lethbridge County to kind of essentially work through the processes and, you know, honor and kind of respect the decision by AUC.
Steve?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Last meeting, it was also mentioned that the AUC hearing, the county did have an opportunity to speak or defend the bylaws. Is that correct?
Okay, Mr. Chairman, if I may, through to Councillor Steve Campbell's question, that is correct, and we discussed that, you know, kind of at our administrative level and with our development review team. And, you know, honestly, just at our level, we found it a little bit odd, you know, insofar as here's a fairly major development proposal. It's kind of contrasts with what exists in Lethbridge County's land use bylaw. My own opinion is that I would think that Lethbridge County should be granted standing and would be, you know, a major player as the AUC went out to, you know, consult with other landowners and impacted or affected bodies. But interestingly, we were not given standing and weren't officially on their agenda for the hearing that they proposed to have, that we would have been able to speak or present any further comments. We did submit some comments in writing. As it turned out, I think just the day before or the morning before the hearing, our CAO and senior planner were ready to go, and as best they could, if given the opportunity to represent the council or at least hear what the hearing was all about. The hearing was canceled. There wasn't even a hearing. And then alas, May 31st, 2019, the decision came down that the AUC granted this approval.
Any other questions or discussion? Of course.
Yeah, I used to comment, Mr. Chairman, I just think it's a great thing to happen in our county. It seems to be, you know, this is somewhat a trend now for a lot of the municipalities to to go this route, you know, solar or windmill or whatever down there, and for us turning it down the first time down there, it certainly didn't help us, because there could be just a rumor, but I heard that there was other people what were interested in it, that they backed off, you know, and I think personally, I think it's a great thing.
Larry? Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. Just further to Councillor Zainstra's point, if you recall, I'm sure you all do, but just I think our very last council meeting on June 20th, there was direction given to administration to, you know, review that whole solar panel and solar farm component in the land use bylaw and look at some ways of kind of maybe making it more malleable, changing the times, you know, suited to, you know, the way the world is changing. And, you know, there is, as again, Councillor Zinstra points out, higher demand these days for alternative renewable sources of energy and so on. And so that will be coming forth to council again in the near future. But until that happens, you know, we're still working under, of course, our current land use bylaw structure.
I have, trouble is, I've got guys in that county that don't want solar panels on good irrigation land, because it's hard to find irrigation land. So there's a lot of fine places where you can put it.
So the big issue here is we've been overruled. And I guess you probably need to weigh in your mind whether or not you want to entertain a lawsuit or not if we were to vote against it. I think is the biggest discussion you're gonna have to wrangle in your mind. It's not necessarily whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, because, I mean, you can argue both sides, so it's just a matter of what's best overall for the county. Larry?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. And to your point, you know, if, for example, council was supportive of the recommended motion today, there's still opportunity to, you know, go a different direction as that land use bylaw amendment, those two amendment applications come forward, right? Just if council weighs, all they're doing today would be saying, you may reapply, and then council will, you know, go through the discussions and the debate and the, you know, council make decisions, you know, going down. So today doesn't, you know, obviously commit council to much in my mind, other than saying, yes, you may reapply, and we'll waive the fees if indeed we go that route.
I'm just curious too, I know you mentioned that there wasn't anything that you were aware of, any other county or MD that have gone against a decision. That's correct, Steve?
Well, yes, Chair, there's, MD of Pincher Creek on a wind application right now is in the process, and they've had a number of meetings the last couple of weeks and getting some legal advice as well, but on a wind farm that was approved that they don't want, they are looking at possibly two things. One is filing, I don't know if you call it appeal, it's not a formal appeal process, but going through the land use secretariat and challenging the AUC on saying that they're not respecting the South Saskatchewan Regional Plan, because the South Saskatchewan Regional Plan does have an energy component there. It talks about you know, supporting renewable development and that stuff. But there's also a section on agriculture and protecting high quality irrigated agricultural land, and they're only making their decisions on the one component, and they're not kind of looking at the other or doing that balance thing that's supposed to happen in the SSRP. So they've been talking to legal advice about going a different route and challenging that way through the land use secretariat on the basically an SSRP challenge. And we haven't seen really, I don't know if much of those have happened in the province yet, but the legislation does possibly allow for that. And the other thing that they're talking about is not giving the zoning, because in MD Pincher you have to apply to an industrial wind energy zone for a wind farm. About, even though they have AUC direction about similar to what you have in front of you, of not granting that rezoning. And then there's an appeal process in here in this section 619 where if you don't grant the rezoning or issue development permit, and of course the AUC decision, they can appeal to the municipal government board and go through appeal process like that. And section 619 subsection 8 states that the MGB, after having an appeal, listening to both sides and all that stuff, can order the municipality to change the land use bylaw or statutory plan to align with the AUC decision, or they can be dismissed the appeal. But I think that municipality's looking at possibly that route, denying them their rezoning, all that stuff, just so that the wind farm has to go to appeal to the MGB, just to lengthen up the process and drag it out. They're just really trying to discourage them and have them go away, type of a thing. So they're trying to throw every obstacle they can at them, type of a thing. So that's their game plan of how they're looking to possibly approach it. In the end, at the MGB, whether they're successful or not, I would say there's probably not a great chance of them being successful in getting an appeal overturned against the AUC. But like I said, they're trying to throw up roadblocks or obstacles to this particular wind developer, just to have them go away or drag it out so it costs them money over 6 months or a year or whatever the case might be.
Thank you.
So is there any more discussion on this? Because we're running about 15 minutes behind schedule now, so Ken and
Yeah, and wasn't aware that this was in the Municipal Government Act, but they don't have shall or may in those words anywhere, and I've got a sneaky feeling any attempt to have it set aside wouldn't work out, so we and that would cost us a lot of money, so.
okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I won't take too long. I think it's unfortunate that the AUC chose to go against this council's decision, and I fully agree with what the Reeves said previously. So with that in mind, I would move that County Council grant a waiver of the 18-month time limit in section 53 of the land use bylaw, and a waiver of the application fees to assess these ventures in order to comply with the policies of the Municipal Government Act, section 619.
Any further discussion on that? Call the question then, those in favor? Those opposed? Carried. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you. So we got a 10 o'clock appointment with Ron Hirsch from MP Engineering. That's the Southern Regional Stormwater Committee, and pages 3 through 36. Debbie.
Good morning, Rob.
Good morning, Morris.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On my left, I've got Ron Hirsch from MPE Engineering, and he's going to present a brief PowerPoint presentation regarding the Southern Regional Stormwater Drainage Project. I'll just quickly go through my summary and motion here before he begins. So Lethbridge County is part of the Southern Regional Stormwater Drainage Committee, and over the past few years have been working towards a regional solution regarding stormwater mitigation in Southern Alberta. Recently, the main committee, represented by elected officials, directed the technical committee and MPE Engineering to determine a formula for funding the project that is fair and equitable across all municipal partners. And this formula, along with some background information, will be in Ron's PowerPoint presentation. Our recommended motion is, and this motion is what came out of the committee meeting was a common motion across all municipalities, so everybody's consistent. The only change would be the percentage in here, which I'll get to. But anyway, the recommended motion is that County Council support the Southern Regional Stormwater Drainage Committee's application for funding to the Disaster Mitigation and Adaptation Fund for the construction of the projects outlined in the September 2014 Southern Regional Stormwater Management Plan report, and agrees in principle to participate in contributing 16% of the total value of the project proposed in the Southern Regional Stormwater Master Plan, less grant funding as presented in the Southern Regional Stormwater Management Committee meeting June 24th, 2019.
Did you go through that once? Just kidding.
Give me a minute to catch my breath. In saying that, I'll turn it over to Ron to do his PowerPoint presentation.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. I was asked by the regional committee to make presentations to council. I basically go over how the funding proposed split was arrived at and answer the questions that the respective councils may have. I just want to start off with a little bit of background about the regional committee in case people don't know about it. The regional,
Sorry, I just want to, this presentation is in your book as well, if you want to follow along in your binder.
The regional committee was started after the flooding that happened basically in 2013. And there a report was prepared and presented in September of 2014. So it's about 5 years old right now. And out of that report, the recommended upgrades for drainage, basically from Lethbridge to Medicine Hat on the St. Mary's main canal, was construction and expansion of Chin, expansion of Sherburne, and expansion of Murray. Chin is just on the east side of Coaldale, Sherburne is by Grassy Lake, and Murray River Reservoir is by 7 Persons. Also recommended that we construct a diversion spillway at Horsefly and Sherburne, increase the capacity of Sauter Spillway by Medicine Hat, construction of a dry dam at Paradise Creek to help prevent some damage in the city of Medicine Hat, and conversion of drain inlets on the St. Mary's main canal to pump systems. The drainage report looked at, it's a very large area. You can see the St. Mary's main canal starts basically to the southwest of Lethbridge at St. Mary's at the reservoir. And this blue line is the SMRD main canal that runs all the way to the city of Medicine Hat. We looked at all the drainage that drains directly into the SMRD main canal system. It incorporates a lot of counties, incorporates 6 counties, numerous municipalities along the way as well. These are the recommended projects that came out of that report. As I said earlier, there's the Chin expansion, so it's expanding the reservoir here. That was an estimated cost of $39 million. The Horsefly Spillway, which I'm here mainly to talk about today, that's directly, it flows by Tabor into Tabor Lake by the sugar factory and into the Old Man. That's $47 million. Expansion of Sherburne or Grassy Lake is $13 million. Sauter, close to the city of Medicine Hat, that's $13 million. Expansion of Murray, which is south of 7 Persons, is $25 million. And then a dry dam on Paradise Creek, which is at the base of the Cypress Hills, is estimated at $13 million. So in total, the mitigation that was arrived at the report has a total cost of $152 million. So it's a fair dollar figure. The Regional Drainage Committee, out of those projects, decided to proceed with what's called the Horsefly Spillway as their #1 priority and to proceed with that construction first. Here is the town of Tabor. So this project is divided into 3 phases. The first phase is a diversion off of this SMRD main canal into Horsefly. Construction of a canal out of Horsefly into Tabor Lake. The sugar factory is right here. And then the third phase would be construction of a spillway from Tabor Lake to the Old Man. So right now, the drainage, sorry, pardon.
So where is Yellow Lake, or is that the same thing as Horse?
No, Yellow Lake, it's not shown on this map.
Because that was a big problem area too, wasn't it?
Yellow Lake is a dead basin. There we go. Yellow Lake is right here.
Oh, okay.
That's Yellow Lake right there. Yellow Lake right now has a pump on Yellow Lake, and it pumps into the SMRD called, it goes into the North Burdette lateral and the North Grassy lateral. It's a dead basin. There's no natural flow from that, so the pumping costs there are split by the SMRD, MD of Tabor, and the County of 40 Mile. It was a problem during 2000. 13, but there isn't much we can do with Yellow Lake.
Okay.
So, in the fall of 2008, the regional committee applied to the Alberta Community Resiliency Program, ACRP, for the horsefly, and it was granted approval for what we call phase 3, but actually it's going to be phase 1, which is the outfall channel from Tabor Lake to the Old Man. So that phase was estimated at $22 million, and the provincial government approved funding there of $7.4 million. The regional committee has also applied to DMAP to fund a portion of that as well. So the ACRP funding covers 33% of the project. So under the DMAP program, which is a federal program, that's the Disaster Mitigation and Adaptation Fund, they will fund up to 40% of the project costs. ACRP, which is a provincial program, will fund up to 33% of the project costs. So the DMAP application was submitted, it was accepted, but given the long time frame for construction, the committee was asked to hold off on submitting phase 2 of the application until this fall. So right now we're looking at submitting phase 2 of the application for DMAP for the horsefly project, which is $47 million. The committee met with the ACRP people on June 24th, and they're recommending that the Drainage Committee apply for the entire project, $152 million. Their feeling is the federal government is looking for big projects, not small projects, and they would consider the horsefly a small project. They're looking for projects of a larger scale, so the provincial government is recommending that when we submit the DMAP application this fall, that it be submitted for the whole $152 million. So as Devin said, the horsefly project, its cost right now is estimated at basically $47 million. ACRP funding would cover $15.5 million of that. DMAP, if the application is accepted, would cover approximately $19 million of that, which would leave a funding shortfall of approximately $12.7 million. For the entire project of $152 million, assuming that the ACRP funding would come through and DMAP would come through, the ACRP would cover $50 million of that, DMAP $60 million, and that would leave a shortfall there of $41 million. So the big question there is, how do we fund the $12.7 million for horsefly and the $41 million for the entire project? So the regional committee is made up of these following municipalities. So the MD of Tabor, County of 40 Mile, Lethbridge County, Cypress County, Cardston County, County of Warner, City of Medicine Hat, Town of Tabor, Town of Coaldale, St. Mary's River Irrigation, and Tabor Irrigation. So, as Devin said, that regional committee tasked the technical committee to try to come up with a funding formula for all the municipalities. So, that technical committee took a look at 5 criteria. First one was the population of the jurisdiction, the area of the jurisdiction within the study boundaries, dividing that down to the area of the jurisdiction that drains into the SMRD main canal system. Also took a look at the assessed value of the property within that jurisdiction, and does the jurisdiction receive a benefit directly or indirectly from each of the 7 proposed mitigation of the projects that we have. These criteria really didn't allow for SMRD or the TID to be included in the calculations, so they're not part of that proposing funding formula. SMRD has said numerous times at the meeting, because it's been asked of them, how much is SMRD willing to kick into the program?
and SMRD has said that they are not willing to put any money in towards that. They're presently working on what is the value of their existing system, which accepts the drainage, and they're looking at that as their contribution towards the project. So criteria 1 through 4 were looked at, and the technical committee also decided to put a weighting factor on those criteria. And some of the weighting factors that the committee decided to use was the irrigated land versus dry land and pasture. The reasoning there was runoff rates from irrigated land is higher than dry land, and therefore should be weighted higher than dry land or pasture. They took a look at the population, cities and towns. The density there is you've got more people packed into a smaller area, and the runoff rate off a town is greater than off a rural area, so the urban areas were weighted higher. And then the toughest one to deal with that the committee had was assessed value. Agricultural land is assessed differently than industrial land or with urban land itself. The assessed value of land really hasn't changed in over 20 years, and irrigated land is assessed the same as land or pasture land. So, given those criteria 1 through 4, if we didn't put the weighting factor on there, these are the funding splits that came out. So the MD of Taber was at 16.6, County of 40 Mile was at 26%, Lethbridge County 14, Cypress 10, Cardston County 3, County of Warner 6, Town of Coaldale 8, Taber 8.5, and the City of Medicine at 6. Once the weighting factors were applied, the MD of Taber basically stayed the same. County of 40 Mile dropped from 26 to 11. County of Lethbridge went up from 14% to just about 20%, and that was basically due to the assessed value within the County of Lethbridge. Cypress County went up slightly to 13%. Cardston County, County of Warner dropped. Coaldale and Taber, they went up again because of assessed value of land, and the City of Medicine went down. Criteria 5 was judged on its own. This was, does that jurisdiction receive a benefit directly or indirectly? So those were, so then we have a different criteria on that. Then this committee decided to take a look at the 3 funding formulas, criteria 1 through 4. No weighting value, they said that was going to be worth 15% of the total. Criteria 1 through 4 with the weighted values was 50%, and criteria 5 was worth 35%. So using these funding splits, these are the funding that the committee came up with to present to the regional committee. So the MD of Taber was at 15%, County of 40 Mile at 15.5, Lethbridge County at 16, Cypress County at 14. So the 4 counties that I guess surround the SMRD main canal were virtually almost the same. Cardston County was at 4%, County of Warner at 5, Coaldale at 12, Taber at 12.5, and the City of Medicine at 6. So these would be the funding splits if we took a look at the entire $152 million. These are the funding splits for just the Horsefly Spillway, which is the first of the 7 that are proposed to be constructed. So the Lethbridge County's portion of the $12.7 million would be $2.035 million. So the regional committee, they did ask that the respective councils take a look at the funding and I guess show your support or non-support for the funding that has been proposed. So I guess I'm here to answer any questions that are there on the proposed funding split. I was in on the technical committee when they were going through all the different scenarios, and I will say it was a tough thing to try to figure out, depending on which weighting factors you put on, and I think the technical committee has done a very good job at, trying to put some little bit of science behind the proposed funding split. So if there are any questions.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's probably pretty hard to argue that you should not put any effort into eliminating certain flooding. My question is, the MDF got hit pretty hard in 18, the spring of 18. What was the total damage of their flooding down there?
That's a tough one to answer. They haven't added up all the costs on that, right? They don't have all their costs in. Most of that was covered by the government in that disaster relief. Direct damages, the MD Tabor didn't receive a lot of direct damages. They washed out, a lot of roads. There was a lot of farmland that was, that had water on it. I don't know how you put a dollar figure on that. A lot of the costs were spent by the SMRID taking snow out of the canal to get that water down the system. And that's where the horsefly spillway would have helped, tremendously there to get the water basically from Stafford to Tabor into the old man faster. The SMRID, they incurred direct costs of about $3 to $4 million just in machinery costs to clean snow. I haven't heard of any costs that the MD has gotten from the damage claims there.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, just like I said, it's not a good thing to say, hey, we're not gonna do anything, because, we gotta think of, the people that get caught in certain flooding and the hardship it creates or whatever, so, yeah, if you can afford that, then, you can't put a cost on that. That's as simple as that, Mr. Chairman.
Steve?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As long as the reservoirs are expanded and everything, the St. Mary's River Irrigation District, it's adequate. The canal system is adequate enough to take the water and to move the water along.
Yes, so the modeling that was done, the largest threat is typically in the spring with a snowmelt event. The rainfall events are not as severe as a spring snowmelt event. So the SMRD main canal, when it was rehabilitated in the 80s, was designed to take the 1 in 100-year storm event. So, a storm event larger than that, the SMRD system is going to experience problems as, beyond that type of a storm event. As Councillor Zienstra pointed out, 2018, the flooding was, it was bad in the Indian Tabor, it was bad in the County 40 Mile. I guess the snow in the canal exasperated that the canal was full of snow, and that snow had to get, the snow had to be removed before the water could flow. If we have a large storm event in June when the SMRD main canal, say, is running, full because of farmer demand, the SMRD canal can take that water up to the top of Canal Bank, so they'll have to shut down the flows, but they can take that flow.
Okay, thank you.
So just one question, I'm not quite sure, are we looking at the total project or just one part of it?
Right now.
It's kind of like
Yeah, so, yes, Mr. Chairman, right now we're looking at just at the horsefly at that project. The committee asked to take a look at if the entire $152 million was approved for funding, what would be the total that the individual county or MD or town would be looking at, long term? The DMAP program, you have to have everything completed within 10 years. There's no guarantees that the ACRP will continue on. There is no commitment that you have to take the DMAP funding if you're approved. So even if you are approved and you decide that we're going to stop now, the money can be returned back to the feds. So right now, what the Drainage Committee is looking for is support for the Horsefly project, which is $47 million, but ultimately to build out the whole 152.
And
Just for clarity, partway through the presentation, you mentioned that the province had said it's better to submit the whole thing. So,
Yes,
so, yeah, federally.
yes.
So I'm just a little confused at your answer because now you're saying the horse fine,
No,
so.
well, we are gonna submit, they wanna submit for the whole $152 million.
Okay,
I guess a problem that the regional committee has had for the last 1 to 2 years is, all the different MDs, counties and towns, there's been opposition to it. There's a lot of, the cash, required is large, and none of the counties or MDs have said we're in or we're out. Part of the DMAP application that we have to submit has to detail how the unfunded portion is gonna be funded. So to have the DMAP application considered, we have to say that, take the 152 million, the $41 million, we have 9 municipalities, they've all agreed that they're gonna participate in this, and this is the proposed funding split. If we say we don't know how the $41 million is gonna be funded, it won't be considered for the DMAP application. So if the county of Lethbridge, say, opts out, or the county of 40 Mile opts out, the regional drainage committee has to either disband or come up with a different arrangement for that funding. But part of the DMAP application is very specific, saying how are you going to fund
so
the unfunded portion.
that my question still is, you've been told more or less by the funding agency that it's more beneficial to do the larger project. So
Yes.
are you intending to put in the larger project or the smaller project?
Right now, well, last year we only put in for the smaller project for the 47 million. So we are intending this fall for the DMAP to be for the $152 million, so the entire project.
So you're looking for commitment?
So we're looking for, yes, so I guess we'd be looking for a commitment from the county, $6.6 million over the span.
Thank you, definitely.
Just one thing, really, it's more about the percentages at this time committing, the dollar amounts. We are going to try and get more provincial funding. There was talk at the committee level to lobby the provincial government on top of the 33% of ACRP funding. So we do want to try and get on top of that 33% more funding out of the provincial government. As Ron said, just because if you get the 40% of DMAP funding, you don't have to come up with your additional to fund the project. You can give that money back if you can't come up with the remaining funds. So I think it's more of the percentage right now of what we want to support in principle, and then we're going to try and get more provincial funding to try and reduce the burden on each municipality.
Because I think I have gone to a few meetings, and I think, but the meetings I went to, they hadn't quite figured out the model yet. But I think with change in the government, there was a change in direction. Is that
Well, the
correct?
change in government is still somewhat unknown. They don't know if the ACRP is going to exist after this fall, so that might be canceled altogether. A number of the councilors on the committee, they wanted to see a dollar figure, not just a percentage, because 16% doesn't seem like a lot of money, but $6 million means more than 16%.
Yeah. Thank you.
any other questions? up at once. Pardon? Don't everybody jump up at once. Go ahead, Morris.
Yes,
You know, I would like to see some dollar figure on what the damages were, you know, in certain municipalities when we had that big flood in 2018, the spring of 2018, you know, that certainly, you know, we need a little bit of backing too, why we approve certain things and be able to take that to the people.
And right now, they don't have those numbers. You know, it's even the 2013, which was the flooding, you know, that happened, you know, in the Bow River and on South Saskatchewan. Nobody has a number on that one yet either.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I agree with Councilor Zeenstra to a point. I think that as a municipality, we talk about our infrastructure, we talk about the importance of our roads, and we've taken steps to invest heavily in that. And I think that drainage is one of those things when it's out of sight, out of mind. When we're in it and it's happening, I think I know the people that I talk to in the county are very insistent that we take steps and we spend the dollars to try and take steps to mitigate flooding. And as we get further away from that event, it seems like it gets put on the back burner. And so I think it's important that we look to invest. That's the only way that we're gonna move forward, is I think we have to commit to making an investment. I guess for me, and I don't want to seem out of line here, but I think the elephant in the room for me would be the lack of the irrigation districts on that funding methodology. And I hear what you're saying regarding how they have the infrastructure, but I'm just echoing what's said to me when I'm talking to county residents. I look forward to when they can, you know, bring a value, put a value on what their distribution system brings to the region. And I think it's just, and I know there are conversations going on in the background at the administrative level with the irrigation districts, and I believe they have made progress. But that's just something that has been a concern that's been brought to my attention, and I would share that. But I think that there's been a lot of work gone into this, and I would support moving forward with support in principle of going forward with this.
Yeah, I would just like to add that at the technical committee level, County Lethbridge, County of 40 Mile, ME&D and Tabor have asked that question of St. Mary's and Tabor numerous times, especially the County of Lethbridge, you know, what is SMRD putting into the pot here?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ron, you know, you're a pretty smart man, you're an engineer, and that didn't make you smart, you were smart already. But anyways, last week I was approached by one of the irrigation district managers, and we were talking about, of course, you know, the amount of runoff you have when you got a storm. And he says he got proof that if you have a storm, that the runoff of irrigation is less than if it's coming off dryland. And the reasons for that, he said that when you irrigate, you create, or whatever you want to call it, but that water will go down. But on dryland, when you get a big storm, he said it seals it and it runs off. And runoff is more from dryland than the irrigation. So anyways, I thought I'd ask you that question, Ron.
Thanks, Morris. There's been a lot of talk about that. Typically, there's a lot of manuals and studies that have been done, and there are accepted runoff coefficients that you use for pasture land versus dryland farming versus the irrigated farmland. You could argue that back and forth forever. When we did the modeling, we used the accepted values that have been used basically across North America for dry land versus pasture versus the other types of farmland. So the other question that always comes into play here is when the ground's frozen, it doesn't make a difference whether it's irrigated or dry land. But accepted values are the runoff rates are greater off of irrigated land because the water content is higher already in that land. It's not a large difference, but it is a difference.
And he was arguing with me like on that one.
There has been a lot of studies done by the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation on runoff rates, and there are accepted values that basically everybody in North America uses.
Any other discussion? So I think you did make a motion, Tori, that you supported the principle, like, the first part, right?
I guess I didn't make the motion,
Oh, you didn't.
Mr. Chairman, but I would be willing to make the motion. Yeah, and I would be willing to make the motion as is worded, that county council support the Southern Regional Stormwater Drainage Committee's application for funding to the Disaster Mitigation and Adaptation Fund for the construction of projects outlined in the September 2014 Southern Regional Stormwater Management Plan report, and agrees in principle to participate in contributing 16% of the total value of projects proposed in the Southern Regional Stormwater Master Plan, less grant funding as presented at the Southern Regional Stormwater Management Committee meeting of June 24th, 2019.
Any further discussion on that? So, just a question, where would the money come from, or we got to borrow that, or put it in phases, or how does it kind of work?
We would have to definitely explore our options, whether it's through debenture or reserves or grant, additional grant funding. We'd have to look at that at the time.
So, when you say the last part of that additional grant funding, can the municipality get a grant on top of a grant, or you know what I mean?
Yeah, that was kind of the idea with the lobbying efforts of the elected officials to go try and get some more funding out of the government.
Okay, no, well, I hope we're more successful on our trip the other day. Okay, go ahead, Steve.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You mentioned that lobby effort, so that could potentially reduce the dollar amounts if you could get some more funding.
That's the, yes.
Yes,
Yeah,
okay.
that's the intent.
Thank you.
Can I just ask one question too, for the clarification? You're saying that if this is successful and the whole 152 million application goes in, you're saying we have a 10-year period to complete the work, is that
Correct.
correct? Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other discussion? Seeing none, I'm gonna call the question, those in favor? Those opposed? Carried.
Thank you.
Thanks very much for coming in.
Yeah, thanks, Ron.
Thank you.
Have a good one.
Wait 45 minutes, or do you wanna get up and stretch your legs for a couple? Okay.
Larry? Larry?
We're going to roll. Yeah, okay, thank you.
Pages 37 to 46.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just provide briefly the executive summary. That is at the June 20th, 2019 County Council meeting. First and second reading was given by County Council to Off-Highway Vehicle Control Bylaw number 19-023. And a motion was also adopted directing the administration to bring the bylaw to this July 4th, today, 2019 special meeting of council for consideration of third reading. If adopted, the bylaw will allow off-highway vehicles to be used on municipal roads in accordance with all provincial laws and the bylaw itself. Previous council direction, again, simply that first and second readings were given to this bylaw by council on June 20th. A little bit of background. This OHV bylaw proposes to regulate and permit, that is allow the use of off-highway vehicles on county roads, and was debated at June 20th council meeting, pros and cons to all bylaws for sure. And council did, however, support those two readings, and again, gave direction to bring it forth today for final consideration. With respect to alternatives and analysis, we simply see two primary options for council, and that is to retain the status quo, and that would make it so that it would remain illegal to operate off-highway vehicles on county roads. However, we'll note that several other rural municipalities in Alberta do have bylaws that regulate, but do allow them, that is OHVs, to be used on municipal roads for any purpose, provided, of course, always that all provincial and municipal laws are being followed. So the other option is to give third reading to the OHV control bylaw number 19-023 so that OHVs may be operated on county roads in accordance with the bylaw. Some revenue is generated by fines for the illegal operation of OHVs on county roads currently, and even if this bylaw is adopted by council, it's anticipated that some fines would still be issued when OHVs are operated on county roads but in contravention of the bylaw or of provincial laws. The reasons for the recommendation are that Lethbridge County citizens currently, when using OHVs on county roads, they're doing that illegally. And again, other neighboring and northern municipalities already have these types of bylaws in effect, which makes it legal for OHVs to be on their municipal roads. The ministerial order from the province also allows OHVs to be on 3-digit numbered highways for farming operations. Council can adopt this OHV bylaw to make it legal for OHVs to be on Lethbridge County roads, or alternatively continue to have community peace officers educate and enforce rules regarding the use of off-highway vehicles on county roads. The administration recommended motion, Mr. Chairman and Council, is simply that bylaw 19-023 be read a third time.
So Larry, one question that arose last time, and I didn't hear you address it, was this does not apply to the use in hamlets. You're not allowed to. So what happens if you're irrigating on, or a farmer is irrigating on the one side, you got to drive through the other side to get there? Do you have to load up your off-highway vehicle and drive through town and then unload it on the other side, or what have you done to address that?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. The way the bylaw is written, you are correct in that it does not permit or would not permit the use of off-highway vehicles in a hamlet for any reason or any purpose. So in the event that maybe, for farming operations, someone lived, geographically in between or on the opposite side of where they needed to access a field for irrigation purposes or whatever, using their OHV, I guess the proper answer is they would have to use county roads to skirt the hamlet to go that way. One other thing, just at a high level to keep in mind, if someone went on the edge of a hamlet and there was maybe debate or discussion over whether or not they were actually in the hamlet or not, the community peace officers do have some discretion and, apply that, I think, fairly and to the best of their judgment. That answers your question, maybe not.
But in other words, you haven't changed your opinion any, it's still the way it was. So, yeah, I guess my problem is with it is, I don't understand why you don't want the ability to use one in the hamlet. Like, I have a problem with that. So I can't support it unless you're gonna allow that. Tracy?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Larry and I talked a little bit after the meeting here about possibly, because in section, where it doesn't say the signs could be permitted, in section 5 there, that perhaps that could be removed, that you could allow it unless otherwise prohibited, so say in Fairview or something where there would be no need for it, you could prohibit OHVs and thereby sign it. Could be an alternative maybe. Prohibit the hamlets that actually don't require farm access around them, but allow it in hamlets that do maybe, I don't know, it's just an option.
Dave?
You allow me, Mr. Chairman. So is it something that you would like to see a section put in here that if it's a farming operation, a farmer is allowed to drive through a hamlet, taking the shortest route through the hamlet?
Well, it kind of defeats the purpose, like if you gotta go 4 miles to get around the hamlet, you're not gonna do it. I mean, we know what everybody's gonna do. When there's
No,
nobody
that's true.
there, they're gonna drive through it.
But to what Larry was saying, that we as officers have a level of discretion that we can use. And if someone was driving through a hamlet to get from point A to point B, we could use that discretion. But if we, I mean, it's something that we could put in here, that if you have to drive through a hamlet, if there's no other way, or if you have to go a few miles around, that's a section we could put in here that would work better, that could possibly be done for sure.
I don't know who's there, but go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Would there be an opportunity to grant a waiver? Would that be something that we could look at possibly in this case? Because I think my concern with just outright allowing use of OHVs in the hamlets, I just have concern over that with the traffic and the denser population within a hamlet as opposed to in the rural setting. I wouldn't be in support of just an all-in allowing it in the hamlets, but if there is to take it out of your hands, so you're not making that discretion call, would there be the opportunity to grant a waiver if it was applied for a producer that either lived in a hamlet and was exiting the hamlet on their OHV, or in the case it's been used cutting through, would something like that be a possibility?
Through the chair, Councillor Campbell, I would think so. Grant a waiver on the individual basis, perhaps, something like that. Maybe a more, a cleaner way, perhaps a more inclusive way would simply be to amend the bylaw to acknowledge exactly what you're saying, to allow, under certain circumstances, OHVs to be operated in hamlet, would be my thought.
Yeah.
I think the biggest challenge would be too, then if we're allowing that access for producers going through the hamlet, it is gonna be challenging to monitor it, would it not? To say who is doing it for that purpose, as opposed to just simply driving through the hamlet. And I think that's gonna be one of the challenges we're gonna have administratively, trying to impose the bylaw.
So, if I may make a slight suggestion, we used to give waivers to operations for a road ban period. Why couldn't you kind of do that on the same basis? If you have land on either side of the hamlet and need to travel through it, you could get a waiver. But if you don't, you shouldn't be there either.
Yeah, no, thanks, Mr. Chairman, for that. No, I would be in support of that, because I can only think of a very few individuals that would be impacted by that, so it shouldn't be administration shouldn't be overburdened by that. That would probably be a 1 or 2 time thing that we would run into. And I would support that for sure.
That's satisfactory.
Yeah.
Morris?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think that would be a good idea, that we put something like that in there. And, I know a lot of you might use the discussion, but that wouldn't have to be done anymore either, if you could have something like that in place.
Well, I'm agreed with that, but now we sent out a survey though. Have we sent out a survey to see if everybody's in favor, if we sent out anything? Have we got any feedback back?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. To Councillor Horvath's question, we didn't send out a survey, but we did send out, after the last council meeting, a public service announcement, letting the public know that this bylaw would be considered at this meeting today for adoption by council. And we received not any that we're aware of direct comments to Lethbridge County, but I know our communications coordinator was monitoring the county's Facebook site, and a couple days ago there were 10 likes to the concept of the bylaw. And I'll just ask quickly, Maddie, were there any more than that, or do you know, did that, no. So we had 10 likes from members of the public, and no, negative comments that we're aware of that were submitted to us.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Just to follow up on that, Councillor Horvath, there wasn't enough time to do an actual survey between readings 1, 2, and 3. So we wanted to make sure the public was at least aware, which is why we sent out the public service.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't want to speak for Councillor Horvath. You brought this forward, Bob, but I know from my perspective anyways, just for the benefit of the greater audience, the idea in my eyes was to provide our residents the ability to legally use a tool that they are already using illegally. Side-by-sides, ATVs, are used extensively, I would say, throughout the county by producers, whether it be for different courses of their operation, be it livestock, moving between yards, and primarily during this season, tending to irrigation. So I think that was, like I said, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I believe that was the intent, is to provide a legal tool for our residents to use. And that's why I've supported it to this point. I think it's just another tool in a toolbox for our producers. There have obviously been concerns raised about safety, and that's always a paramount concern. And the other ramifications that could come with it, those who aren't using it for agricultural uses. But as a tool, I support it. Thank you.
Thanks, Tori.
Any other discussion? We do need a motion of some kind of, Bob?
I would like to make a motion to approve third reading.
With an amendment?
Amendment? With amendment. Have a waiver. You strike 5.13.
If that's what you want.
To amend, I would amend that. No?
How do you, yeah.
HOVs are only permitted with a waiver, or those with a waiver.
Why don't you just add on to the very end after submissions with,
Well,
except under the conditions of a waiver.
if we're gonna, that's gonna be pretty hard.
Well, if you don't have land on either side, you shouldn't get a waiver. If that's satisfactory to you, you know that. You know the law better than me, so.
Yeah. I'm not really happy with all the, on the gravel roads with all the big liners and stuff.
I know what it is they use it for the, we should probably just take, for what I'm concerned is having a waiver for one person or another. And the rest of the stuff here. Has to be a farmer.
Yeah.
So he's not a farmer. I think that's where all the roads on those roads goes. We don't have many city people out there.
it out completely, then anybody who lives in a hamlet could potentially use one in a hamlet.
So we want that waiver in there.
So are you moving?
Yes.
Hey, you-
Yeah, so with that,
Yeah, with that waiver. Would you?
Go ahead, Norris.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could you read that back again, exactly how the motion is gonna be?
Yeah, do it, Norris.
move that bylaw 1923 be read a third time with the following amendment. Section 5.13 should read, off-highway vehicles are not permitted to travel within hamlets and subdivisions except under condition of a waiver.
Steve?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know the original intent of this was open up for farm use, but now we're opening up for everybody. And that's kind of what I don't like, because you've got, acreage owners, people in group country residentials that already have licensed, OHVs that are now permitted to be on the roads, and like I said before, it's just gonna create a safety issue. You've got dusty roads, people can't see, and these vehicles are only permitted to go 50 kilometers an hour. You've got other vehicles going 80 kilometers an hour. I just don't see it as a safe operation.
Morris?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. You mean to put the waiver in there, Steve?
No, I was just referring to, it is open up to everyone, anyone with a licensed OHV on a gravel road or on our paved roads. That's the way the bylaw is written.
Yeah.
Not just on the hamlets I'm talking about.
But I thought the understanding is that, just like Tori said earlier down there, it's just another farm tool, and it's mainly being put in place on there for that type of use. I didn't think it was any of it about recreation was put in place on there. It is for farm use.
Go right there, Steve.
If I'm not mistaken, it's open for everyone. It's not just, there's no farm exemption or anything like that.
Correct. Go ahead, Larry.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. When this bylaw was researched, we looked at a number of other municipalities, and we could not find any municipality with an OHV bylaw that specified which user groups could or could not use OHVs on public roads. In other words, they didn't leave it exclusively for farming operations, or conversely, I guess, exclusively for recreational purposes or any other purposes you could think of. It was just either yes or no, you are permitted to ride on the rural roads, providing you follow the rules of the bylaw and all provincial rules. So that's why we presented the bylaw this way. We didn't go so far as to, again, try to limit it.
Yeah, and that's the problem, it's gonna be open for everybody. We can't discriminate between, if some person is allowed to ride his bike because he's a farmer compared to somebody that's in the hamlet, whatever, so. I don't know how you differentiate, and without a waiver, that's not gonna.
David?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I just actually here 2 hours ago had a discussion with he was a Lethbridge police officer, and then he was a peace officer out in Raymond. And Warner County has a bylaw that got passed, if I'm not mistaken, last year. And I asked him if they saw an increase in OHVs outside of farming operations in their county when they passed the bylaw. And he said he did not see an increase. It was still mostly the OHVs were used for farming operations. That was just in that county. I'm not speaking for our county. That could be a different scenario here. But I know that was a concern that was raised last time, so just brought that question up to him.
Yeah, I think some of it deterred for, will be that 50-kilometer maximum speed limit, because there's those other guys that wanna go joyriding here, you can go over 50 kilometers an hour. So, you gotta, I like that, 50 kilometers in there.
Any other discussion? Norris?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, again, you know, like, I think the intent is where, what we were all thinking and what some of the farmers in the county were thinking, what they would like to see, and I think we're getting there now. And I feel we should put it in place, and if it needs an amendment, if we see some abuse of the bylaw, then we're gonna have to revisit our bylaw again. But now I feel we should maybe go ahead with it.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, I'm gonna call the question. Those in favor? Those opposed? It's carried. As amended. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I can do. You guys can carry on if you want.
I know, right?
Which one are we on?
We're G2. We're gonna do G2,
Oh, okay.
we're gonna do G2 and then J1. Just Warren's out doing it anyway.
Ready, Ted? Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. My report is on page 62 to 65. This is bylaw 19-018 for the McNally Community Association air management system replacement loan. During the May 16th council meeting, council approved their request to secure loans in the county for up to $60,000 for a term of 5 years at interest rate of prime +1 to be used to replace their air management system replacement loans. Council did proceed with first reading at the June 6th council meeting. The bylaw was since advertised as per the MGA requirements, and to my knowledge, no valid petition was received by the CAO. So council can now proceed to go to second and third reading. And nothing has changed in that. We still are recommending up to $60,000. I understand they do have an application coming forth later in the community grant program for $20,000 and possibly some funding from Fortis, as well as a private donation. So we expect that amount that they actually borrow to be significantly lower than the $60,000, but regardless, we'll leave it at up to $60,000. From here, if we get second and third reading today, there's a 30-day waiting period to become a valid bylaw, and upon that becoming a valid bylaw, then we can then advance them the funds for their system.
Any questions? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So with their other fundraising and donations, they haven't given you an update on what the dollar amount sort of is to date?
Not to my knowledge, Larry, no.
No, through the Chair, to Councillor Campbell, I haven't heard an update either. One thing we did know, and apologize if it was already stated, but we're looking to approve up to a level, right? So, you know, kind of taking into consideration when the actual time comes when they need that money from the county, we can, I think, effectively reduce whatever that borrowing amount is by whatever they've accumulated or acquired, you know, since they started.
Yeah, it was just sort of being curious at what they've
I'm
sort of
sorry,
fundraised
yeah.
so far, but yeah, that's okay.
Yeah, pardon me, no, I haven't heard from them for a few weeks now.
We were kind of waiting to see how they did a fundraiser on June 15th, and I know it was sold out, but we haven't got a final yet, but once we do, we'll report back.
Yeah, we'll certainly report to council what the final amount comes in at.
Any other questions? So when is 30 days start from the date?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll move second reading of bylaw 19-018 for the McNally Community Association Air Management System Replacement Loan.
All in favor? All opposed? Yeah. Yeah. How was the reading? Okay.
Can you speak into my,
Sorry.
Yes, I'll move third reading on bylaw 19-018.
You're welcome. All in favor? All opposed? Okay, it's passed.
Page 80. Page 80. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On page 80, my report starts with Jennifer's report. I'll just present on her behalf. It's the 2019 business tax adjustments, and these are just adjustments that we've received as of the end of the month. There will most likely be more coming forward in July, as July 31st is the deadline for adjustment requests. We do have a summary of 8 requests that have been submitted for council's review, totaling $7,725. If approved, that would reduce our levy by the same amount that we would collected. These adjustments are listed on page 83, and they do follow the guidelines of the policy as presented. Any questions?
Yeah. Any questions at all?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So far though, that's less than kind of what we've had in the previous couple of years, I guess. But probably those adjustments have also been changed for what they get as a tax notice, up to date or not?
Through the chair, through to Councilor Campbell, Steve Campbell. Well, the notices are gone out every year. They have to apply for the same waiver or adjustment. So they go out based on their storage capacity, unless it's something significant, you know, they sold a portion of it or they closed a portion of it, then that would be adjusted annually. But if it's just on their capacity and how many units they held in there during the year, that has to be applied for annually. The amount varies from year to year. Jen gave me a kind of a history here. We had $45,000 in 2016, $90,000 in 17, and only 26 last year. So I couldn't tell you what to expect. I don't know how well the markets were last year, but 77, I mean, that's a month worth of adjustments. Of course, like I said, they do have till the end of July, where we'll likely bring forward another. But yeah, that's about right now.
Today's our announcement of our funding for. Hey, that's what we have. Anybody else with questions? Hey, so
they still got the end, till the end of.
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Yes, I would move that county council approves the 2019 business tax adjustments in the amount of $7,725 as presented.
All in favor?
Thanks. Thanks, Tracy.
Thanks, Tracy.
So what we do now is we get those canceled and reissued to them, so they still have a month to pay their amounts. Thank you.
Thank you.
We received a email invitation from Nanika Yuko Japanese Garden for their 52 years anniversary, scheduled for July 12th, 2019 at the Japanese Garden. Our recommended motion is that any member of council wishing to attend the celebration scheduled for July 12th be authorized to do so.
Okay. Anybody want to know? Yeah. Well, let's do the recommendation. Yeah. I'll recommend, or move that any member of council wishing to attend the Nikki Euchre 52 years of Japan-Canada Friendship Celebration scheduled for July 12th, 2019 at the Japanese Garden be authorized to do so.
And are you the only counselor attending, just because they usually like us to RSVP that? So is there anybody?
I was asked, oh, make sure. Anybody in agreement to the motion? All of you. Yeah, community grants, strategic plan, ICF. Who all wants to go to? Yeah, it'll be pretty hard. Depends on how busy you are. Yeah. But you want to go for sure? I'll go. Okay.
We can do the ICF if we want. It's straightforward. Can we get ICF up? I know you can do it.
Which page?
I can do it. I have no agenda. What page is it on?
Page 100. Somebody needs a vacation, that would be me. This is the ongoing process of the rural to rural ICF applications, and this latest one is the one with Lethbridge County and Vulcan County. This has been, the draft has been developed by us based on the Tabor framework. We've worked with the CAO of Vulcan County. He's made some changes, and we've agreed to this draft between ourselves and Vulcan, and they are bringing it forward to their council as well, I believe, in the next week or so. So are there any questions?
None?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I missed maybe something on here. Like the county of Vulcan, they wanted to make some changes, and what are their changes? I missed that again.
Just the basic motherhood statements. They wanted to tweak it a little bit so it was more reflective of the relationship between Lethbridge County and Vulcan County. They didn't want to go with the standard. There's no major changes at all. It's just the overall broad statements about working together, collaboration, cooperation. Nothing glaringly concerning or obvious.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On page 110, where it lists, where there's a list of municipal services, were they less skating rinks, outdoor rodeo grounds? Is that kind of overall, or is that within a certain distance of the boundary?
I believe that's overall, and one of the requirements under the MGA for ICFs is we do have to list our services and their services, and I believe they did for the whole of Vulcan County.
Okay.
On that, if they got a V there, that, they've got rings, like,
V is for Vulcan, L is for Lethbridge, and there's an error there. We missed one. So V is for Vulcan, L is for Lethbridge, and D is for both counties would have.
any other questions? For a motion?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that the intermunicipal collaboration framework agreement between Vulcan County and Lethbridge County be adopted.
Okay, all in favor?
I'll move second reading of bylaw 19-029, the ICF framework.
All those in favor? Third reading?
Go to third.
Report third?
Consider third.
Just that, I think, right? Because my first one was just to adopt it, and then Steve gave it first.
I'll do second motion.
Oh, sorry, I thought it was, sorry. Yeah. Sorry.
For second. Second. Yeah.
I'll do second reading. All in favor? Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I move that council consider third reading of bylaw 19-029.
Okay, all in favor?
Want me to stay for the strategic plan, or do you want me to do that after lunch? Oh, sorry. Got it.
Okay.
I move third reading of bylaw 19-029.
All in favor? Okay.
So what have you done?
You
We did, for the McNally boiler, we did the, business tax, and we did the ICF.
And the invitation. So you just need the, strat mile?
Yeah, and the community,
grant program.
we can wait for after lunch for both of those.
Yeah, maybe, did they discuss it for us?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. That was my suggestion, that we break for lunch, because a lot of people know when I'm late for lunch, I get pretty hourly, so we best go for lunch first.
I'm good with that.
You made a motion for that, huh?
Yes.
All in
Maybe
favor?
get a better mood out of lunch.
Opposed? Carried. I-1, page 66 to 72, community grant program. Larry, are you doing that one?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I will do.
Is that what you got handed out?
Yes.
Nobody likes those chairs. Nobody likes those chairs, Larry, even traded chairs.
Well, it was just kind of out there a bit, so, yeah.
Oh, worse.
Ready to roll? Go ahead. Okay, thank you. Good afternoon. So page 66 of the agenda is where we're at. I'll just provide the executive summary. We received 17 applications for funding under the Community Grant Program and the Land Trust Program. The applications under the Land Trust Program, there were actually just 3 of them. And we're proposing, Mr. Chairman, that we'll bring those forth to council at a later date, probably in August, maybe September, and I can explain a little bit more about that if you'd like in a moment or two. The remaining 14 applications all fall under the Community Grant Program, which are more specifically addressed in this report. Previous council direction policy is that in May of 2018, there was a resolution given to it directing administration to develop a Community Grant Program policy, which we did, and then in February of this year, the policy number 176 was adopted by council, and subsequent to that, or actually before that actually, $100,000 for that particular grant program was approved by council in the 2019 operating budget. So we have a community grant policy in place and $100,000 towards that policy and that program. Advertising for the community grant program occurred in May of this year, and we received a total of 17 applications by the end of May, which was the deadline for submission. 3 of the applications are appropriate for consideration under the Land Trust Grant Program, and that is because they are for county-owned property. And if you remember some of that discussion we had in the past few months and over the last year or year and a half about the Land Trust Program, those funds must be directed for county-owned properties only or school board purposes. So we've sort of set those aside and moved them over to that stream. The remaining 14 were reviewed under the Community Grant Program, and they were scored based on the criteria that is set out in the Community Grant Policy 176. Some of those criteria, not all of them, but some of them are to determine whether or not a project is capital in nature. In other words, it must be capital. It's not for operating or, kind of small, tools and toys, that sort of thing. It considers the overall benefit that would be provided to county residents if grants were provided. Participation from organization through volunteer hours and fundraising and so on. Whether or not they received a grant in 2018, because in the Community Grant Program, there is a clause that, kind of we've done over the years through the Land Trust Program and just kind of perpetuated that, and that is that an organization may only receive grant funds every second year, not every year. So that was another factor. And in fact, that disqualified probably half of them, or 6 or 7 of them in any event, because they received funds last year. As well, the criteria look at the overall significance to the community, and we have included the actual grant policy, which goes from page 69 to 71, and there's all the grant criteria assessment there, if you wish to have a further look. Looking at alternatives and an analysis, the Community Grant Program was again created by council and funded to a maximum of $100,000 in 2019. Provision of grant money to eligible organizations is in line with the county's strategic plan, specifically excellent quality of life, good governance and management excellence, and helps to build strong relationships within the region. The amounts that we have recommended to you today, of course, may be adjusted by council. Financial implications, again, $100,000 has been set aside in the Community Grant Program in the 2019 operating budget. And we recommend, Mr. Chairman and Council, that $71,600 of that $100,000 be allocated to eligible organizations under the Community Grant Program for this year. If approved by council, it would leave $28,400 in the budget, which could then be carried forward for use next year. The reasons for this recommendation are to provide support and commitment that aids the development and delivery of sport, social, cultural and recreational programs to eligible organizations. The recommended allocations are deemed to have met this criteria, or these criteria. The recommended motion, back to page 66, is that council approve the recommended allocations and awarding of funds to 2019 community grant program applicants in accordance with the spreadsheet attached to the July 4th, 2019 community grant program report to council. And I'll just point out that that large, blown up, magnified spreadsheet that you have before you is simply a replication of what's on page 72. I do realize that the font is kind of small and it's a little bit challenging to read.
Yeah.
To say the least, and I'm with you, Councillor Easter, it's for my benefit too, believe me. I do have right here all of the applications that we did receive, so if council, is interested or, has questions about anything specifically, we could look at them and have a slightly closer look. Maybe I'll just turn your attention to that spreadsheet, however. So you'll notice the kind of gray bar or line running horizontally, just a third of the way down the page or so. The 6 organizations above that, administration is recommending that those organizations receive funding. The ones below that, administration is recommending that they do not receive funding in 2019 through this program. And the reasons for either recommending approval or recommending that they don't receive money this year are on the far right column there, you'll see. So just below the line, for example, the ones we're recommending don't receive funds from council this year. You can see first 1, 2, they both received a grant in 2018. And the other ones, we've deemed that they are not capital purchases. Well, the next 4, at least in the bottom 2, that they do not meet the community grant criteria. And again, if there are specific questions, we can pull up each application and kind of go through our rationale. We sat down, we took a couple different meetings, spent a good, probably close to 4 hours or so, reviewing these applications, talking about them, scoring them, and so on. And that's how we came up with these recommendations, which again are based on the criteria established in the policy. So maybe that's probably enough explanation to kind of hopefully set the groundwork or the framework for our discussion.
Morris?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm glad you pointed that out, Larry, that, you guys sat down and scored them and you come up with some sort of where they should be, some of the applications. But when you guys review them and score them, is there a county council committee on that, or it's just you and?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, through you to Councillor Zeenstra's question, no, it's not. It's just done administratively at this point. Certainly that's something, in the future maybe could be looked at and, might be an appropriate use of establishing a committee to do that. But to this point, and this year at least, no, it's just been at the administrative level.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? I've got 2 for you. Yes. I'm just not sure, Cooley Men's Saddle Club, you got it down as Electoral Division 1. I'm not sure where that is.
Okay. My knowledge of the geography of Lethbridge County is not quite as good and broad as the senior planners, but let's see if we can find a clue here, Mr. Chairman, that will let us know exactly where that is. So Cooley Winds Saddle Club, the submission was from Sandra Felger.
Okay.
And she is based, it says, in Turin, which I know is not Division 1. But just because she lives there doesn't mean she's maybe not associated with this group who's looking to do some work in Division 1. So,
well, I kind of wondering if the arena is the one out at Oscar's place.
it's for arena repairs and upgrades. So you may be onto something there, yes. So 4-H community uses it.
Well, but it's a private facility. Yeah. So I'm kind of just wondering where it is, how that works.
So although it's a private facility, the community grant program policy just talks about it being, I'll just maybe review a couple of the criteria just for all of our knowledge and awareness here. So we're looking for a program that aids with the development and delivery of sport, social, cultural, and recreational programs to eligible organizations. So maybe begs the question, what is an eligible organization under this program?
Is eligible organization spelled out there?
We might get there, I think, yeah,
Oh, okay.
at least offer some clues here. Again, I went over a couple of those criteria, just, talks sort of high level and in general terms, address general programming gaps within the community, foster and promote active living through physical recreation. Priority will be given to those requests which most benefit county residents through improvement of facilities and encouragement of participation in the community. They received grant last year, they're not eligible. Projects for publicly owned parks, recreation areas, school boards are deferred to the land trust program. So again, that doesn't kind of apply here. Projects are limited to capital improvements, I think we touched on that, and it says explicitly as well, shall not be applied toward operating expenses, donations, wages, uniforms, or other kind of personal items. County administration will work with community groups and organizations to ensure funding is utilized appropriately. And approved funding is released when project invoices and final costing summaries are provided to the county upon completion of the project. So that's our limit. So the fact that, as you point out, Mr. Chairman, this particular group, it was kind of a private organization.
I don't know that.
Oh,
I'm just asking you where it's located, because I've never heard of it, to be honest with you.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just Googled it now, Mr. Chairman, and just for reference, in 2017, they did receive $5,000 through the Land Trust Reserve Fund grants. So just to have some context there.
Was it
Cooley Wind South Club, arena upgrades 5,000, and that's right on our.
Does it have a location for it?
Sorry, this is just the sheet on our letterhead that we would print.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, because our senior planner isn't here. She was the one who put all those divisions in, and
Okay.
she knows that. So
I guess I may have heard of the name, but I don't know where it is.
Yeah.
I thought you knew that.
How's that?
I thought you knew that.
Oh, yeah, sure. I don't even know the difference between a helmet and a hamlet, so I mean. And my last question is, the very last one down here, the Nobleford Firefighter Society. What part of their project wasn't meeting the criteria? Like, was it for training?
Yeah, it didn't meet the grant criteria. I think there were a couple reasons there, although we, acknowledge the great work they do and, that their application is fair, that they asked. But we determined it didn't meet the criteria of being sport, cultural, recreational, or social. It's, I guess on one hand you could argue for the greater good of the community if you have skilled, well-equipped, trained firefighting departments and so on, but in this particular case, again, we deemed that it didn't fit those criteria, and so we said they were not eligible.
And it says not capital, so I'm just curious, what were they wanting to do?
Sure, I can be more specific here. And what they were looking for was training grounds facility upgrade project, providing groundwork and a fence for the Nobleford Fire Department, leveling earth, scraping, applying gravel, concrete pad, and a fence. They were looking to be able to assist in giving an area suitable for training and be able to host neighboring fire departments for training scenarios, fire prevention, education area, and so on.
I guess I'm just wondering, why isn't that considered capital? Because to me, it seems like it would be, right? Because right here it says not eligible, not capital. So.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, maybe it's one of those ones that's debatable and
Yeah,
you
just
know,
curious.
worthy of discussion, for sure, yeah. I think, if I recall, when we looked at that one, we had trouble as well establishing it as a benefit and a delivery of sport, you know, certainly not that. Social, maybe, cultural, probably not, and recreational, not. So is it a social good, a social well-being? That was maybe part of the question as well. And, you know, moving earth and so on, that's kind of the operational side, you know. I know you still have to buy earth or gravel. Maybe that could be looked at as capital.
Oh, yeah, the pad and fencing up, I was just curious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anybody else have any questions? Morris?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know we put a policy in place or whatever, you know, but it looks like to me that the way it went again, I don't 100% agree with it. And the first one is down there, the bully one, that's a good one. I didn't have a clue what that was. But anyway, the fence of St. Joseph's School, you know, the thing is, it's in Colville, I believe, isn't it? Okay. The thing is, they belong to school division. And I feel some of those school divisions, they have playgrounds and they do have ball diamonds or whatever, and I think they should look after their own, because we got a couple of them, but below the gray line down there. I think they're a very big importance to the county, and they're not getting anything. But here, and then the same thing with the Kinsman Club of Colville, you know, it's in Colville, and I'm not sure how much they do in the county, but the thing is, the first league, those are very questionable to me. And the reason that I say that, of course, you know, the Shaughnessy Community Association, they got turned down. That is a hamlet in the county, and we've been hammering on it, you know, for I don't know how many years, how important these associations are in the hamlets and trying to keep the hamlets alive. You know, that's the criteria I would have liked to see. You know, and that's the same thing with the Prairie Tractor Club and Engine Society. It's getting to be an unbelievable great thing for the county down there, you know, and I guess, you know, the policy is, yeah, once every second year they can have it, not every year. But I feel some of them should come on a yearly basis. That's my feeling. And that's, so that was the Shaughnessy and the Prairie Tractor Club, and then I thought there was one more down there, I guess that's it. You know, like, so I'm not sure, and that's why, you know, like when you have that group for reviews or whatever, but there's not a single county councilor on that, and I think we're missing something. Because the first fee what I approved down there, to me, it looks like, you know, if they didn't get it, you know, they're gonna get it somehow. That's the way it looks. But if you look at the Prairie Tractor Club, you know, it's getting to be quite a society down on there. They're screaming for funding. And I know that myself personally, and I think that some of you guys might know it too, you know, whatever. And they're being bypassed. I think they never, ever should be bypassed. That should not be such a thing as every second year. And that same thing with the Shaughnessy Community, I don't know which one was it again, the Shaughnessy Communities Association. It should be looked at a yearly basis. They should come first, and then we should see what we have available yet for the other ones.
I guess when we looked at the policy, when was it, Larry?
I did say that, I know that it's a policy, but
Yeah.
it's maybe that policy got to be reviewed before you review anything else.
Okay, because we just brought it back to council very recently, and we did have long discussions about it, so I guess, was that issue brought up?
I thought then it said the certain ones, you know, they should be looked at on a regular basis. But I guess my voice isn't carried very well, and it was missed.
But anyways, that is, honestly, that is my thoughts about it, and I think that's the way it should be. These are a couple of really important ones to the county, and they should be looked at for sure, on a yearly basis, but that's not the policy. Thank you.
Anyone else with any comments? You're deep in thought there, Ken.
You guys, when you're judging these, just look at the paper. Do you ever go out and look at the actual place?
Councillor Benson, no, we haven't done that. Last year, the county just kind of on the fly, gave out some donations. It wasn't as organized. This year, it's a bit more organized. Next year, you know, we'll I think have our system down, but no, we didn't go out. I didn't go out. Again, Hillary was part of this, so she, you know, knows just through her regular day-to-day job of being out in the community, knows a lot of the locations and kind of what's going on there, but we didn't make any specific, at least I didn't, any specific trips out there to look at any of these.
It's pretty hard to judge, but just what they put down.
You may.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and the reasons that some of them apply year after year because they were basically encouraged by whoever, I think it was my council, you know, apply anyways. And then we'll see where you're gonna fall in place. And that's,
Well, I know the reason why we chose every other year is to allow the opportunity for everybody to kind of share in the pot. So,
But we do have some of them that should be.
well, how do you decide that though?
Well,
Who is right, and who is wrong on that?
well, if you look at the Shaughnessy one, that is.
sorry, Mr.
No,
Chairman.
I can hear you.
Yeah, but that little thing with them and that. But anyways, and I know we discussed that, you know, or whatever. However, we also discussed, you know, which one is the real importance to the county. And if you look at the Shaughnessy Association, that's the hamlet in the county or whatever, well, I can't think of any more importance that. And if you look at the Tractor Prairie Club down there, it's in the county. It's been built up by county residents. And, you know, and I think today, you know, the majority of the volunteers are still county residents, you know, and whatever. That should be the priority.
Oh, Tracy?
All right, thanks, Mr. Chairman. If I could just add the comment to the every 2 years thing, there could also be a number of regular recipients of this grant that didn't apply because they know that they're not eligible every 2 years, following the rules, right, and not applying. I know Ready Made also receives quite a bit of funding from this. So I'm just saying I know there's 2 on here that are in the county that could be eligible, but there could be others that didn't apply knowing that they weren't eligible, so take that into account as well.
Larry?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Last year, I know council gave out 14 different grants. This year, you know, based on what we presented, at least we're recommending 6. And interestingly, as noted as well, we're recommending that we award 71,600 out of a possible 100,000. So we're, you know, under budget, if you will, on that. And you know, I'm not here to argue whether it's right or wrong, but you know, the facts are, as I see it, simply based on the criteria and based on the policy, you know, in place. There just weren't that many groups asking for that much that even met that $100,000. And so to Councillor Zeenstra's point, certainly, you know, if council breaks through a resolution, right, we can't just talk about it, but we need firm direction if that's the way council thought we would go. We could revise that policy or bring it back with some options, soften up the criteria, you know, so you know, just we made sure we could give out that $100,000 each year. I guess because there were so many last year, it sort of makes them ineligible for this year, and we're down to a mere 6 who would meet that criteria, and again, not even utilize the entire $100,000 budget.
Yeah. Just to a cautionary note, if we do revise the policy, and if we do that for this year, we have to be extremely careful, because as Tracy alluded to, a lot of people may not have applied knowing they didn't meet the criteria. So if we do change the policy, it's pretty unfair to those that didn't apply because of the current rules. So I would suggest that if we do change the policy, we do it for the next intake of the funding.
Ken?
Yeah, I thought that the land trust grant could only be given to specific schools and county property. Okay?
Yes.
So, and I thought there was supposed to be a division. I thought there was, like, it's gonna be 100,000 for one community grant, because that's why that was made, because they couldn't get that. And yet, the one that qualified for land trust should get some. And I thought that was 2 different areas.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, through to Councillor Benson, definitely, you know, I think we should look at this as 2 streams. If we just set aside the land trust for the moment and think of the community grant, it's $100,000 that council just chose, you know, didn't have to establish that, but chose to put in the budget along with a community grant program for just organizations out there, as some of the ones on this list, most of them in fact, that meet the criteria. So we can award up to $100,000 a year for that.
Meet the criteria of the land trust.
That's right, the land trust criteria right out of the Municipal Government Act is that it must be county-owned property, and for, you know, upgrades and improvements to parks or community halls, that sort of thing, or school board purposes. And even the schools here, we saw they're kind of you know, parent councils. They're not the school board proper, so that's why we haven't directed them. And they're not, well, they are in the county, I guess, in the town of Coaldale in particular in these cases, but they're not in Lethbridge County specific. So there are some other ones for playgrounds, for example, in hamlets that will be coming forth under the land trust program, because that's county-owned property, county-owned investment, and there's much more money, in fact, set aside in, you know, in the land trust grant program. There's just under $1 million, in fact, right now.
That's what I was gonna ask.
Yeah. So.
But I thought that we started the community one because it didn't qualify for any of the grants for the land trust.
That's correct, yes. If we didn't have the community grant program, we wouldn't even be doing this. We'd have 3 applications that we'll bring forward to you in the near future that might be eligible for some funding under the land trust program. All these groups here, none of them would meet any of the criteria or the clear criteria for the land trust, so they wouldn't be eligible for any money if we didn't have the community grant program.
So now the county put in 100,000.
Yes.
Okay, how much did the land trust put in?
The land trust grant is funded by reserves that are paid to the county when subdivisions occur, and that's sort of collected and right, yeah, accumulated, sorry, over the years, and it's up to right now somewhere, like I say, about $950,000. The policy that council established for the land trust is that we maintain a minimum of $250,000 in that land trust at all times. So there's, you know, conceivably around $700,000 that could hypothetically right now be used for programs or improvements rather eligible under the land trust. What we're going to bring forth won't even get near to that amount. It's be much less, but.
Can I just ask a question to follow up on Councillor Benson, Deputy Reeve Benson, sorry. Did we specify in the policy for the land trust how much we would give yearly? Or is it just based on applications?
Wide open, based on applications that will be brought forward and in effect initiated, well, in part by community groups in hamlets, for example, but through administration, because administration.
So there's
really
there's no limit?
There's no limit, other than we can't exceed what we have available, of course.
Okay.
Beyond that, there's no $20,000 limit, for example, as there is with the community grant.
Thank you.
Tracy?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Just further to Larry's comments there as well. I believe that most of the land trust type projects are gonna come through the budget process as well. A majority of them, but did you mention that there was 3 that qualified here for the, not here, but how much were those that are gonna be brought forward, do you remember?
I'm not sure that all 3 qualify, but a couple of them. We just got one quote for playground equipment through Gary Seacrest and Ag Services. He's really got a good handle on that. I think it was somewhere up in around the $56,000 range, if I recall.
Sorry, I have a follow-up. I guess my question wasn't clear. When the applications come in, not for this stream, for the land trust stream, you're saying these are only allowed to ask for up to 20,000. I wasn't asking how much they were allowed to ask for. I was asking in the policy of the land trust, do we have a set amount that we yearly, like we do this 100,000? No. Okay. Gotcha. No, it's okay.
And then further to that, sorry, Ann, is because the land trust is for county-owned properties, there's no applications per se. It's just projects, in-house projects that we do.
Okay.
That the source of funding would be the land trust reserve. There's no applications. Outside community groups can't apply for that money.
That's clear.
They're
Thank
internal
you.
projects, yes.
Yes, good.
Okay.
Thank you. Now I got it.
Okay.
Steve?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the Turin Community Club, the recommended grant amount of $8,800, can it be boosted up to the $18,000 that they requested? I just see the Monarch and McNally Community Associations, the recommended grant amount is the same as what they requested, or is there something holding the Turin one back?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Campbell. The Turin one, I'll just grab the application here. Based on the criteria in the policy, we reached the conclusion that not all of what they were asking for were capital improvements. I might be able to give some examples here. What they were looking for is, they called it community center security and storage. They wanted to secure their parking lot with fencing and gates to reduce vandalism, put in and replace trees for beautification. You know, we normally, I think, don't consider trees as being falling under capital. Repair parking lot damage, buy a metal storage container, and so on. How we came up with that $8,800 amount was for fencing around the exterior of the property. We excluded grading and sloping of the parking lot, sort of considering that to be more of an operational kind of undertaking. Tree removal and supply, again, we consider that more to be operational. And then the other piece that we said, okay, we can deem that to be capital, was the metal storage container. So fencing and the metal storage container, based on the information they gave, would be $8,800. The difference between that and the full amount they requested is the exclusion of those pieces that we deem to be more on the operational side of things.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Seeing none?
So there is a land trust grant part?
Yep.
We're not using that yet at all?
No.
Coming in August.
That, so, just the Diamond City, hopefully you'll have some estimates of the cost to repair the building by then. That may be in at that time.
That's right, and we could include that. And you see, that wouldn't even technically be coming if it comes forth from the Diamond City Community Association. It's county-owned property, so, I mean, they would maybe have some input and influence, but it would be coming really from staff, the requests for money from the land trust. because it's for county-owned land. So an outside body can't really ask for money that can only be directed to county-owned property.
So maybe to save confusion, because I know this used to all be one application and now it's two and it's kind of confusing. I'm confused, but I'm getting there. But why, is it possible, would it be better if we put the land trust applications through the regular budget piece as Tracy suggested and not really call them applications and they're actually a budget item?
Yeah, and we discussed that too about the Diamond City one, because by the time that facility detailed review is done, will be into the budget season likely. And unless it's something emergent that needs to be taken care of right away, it can go through the regular budgeting process, as should any of the playground requests or anything like that.
Okay, yeah, thanks. I just think it might be clearer.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Just to kind of close up here, I apologize for the confusion, and it is confusing. You know, we kind of transitioned from one program, split off into two, with the original land trust program still in place, but we have different criteria now. We're clearer on that, and this new program. I really do believe firmly that for 2020, whether we create a new policy or amend them or whatever, you know, we will have the little bumps of this transition cleared up, and I think things will be much clearer for, you know, the public and just everyone involved, so. Appreciate it.
One more thing too, I think if we get these applications early enough, it might be beneficial, and I don't mean to make a big expense, but if we knew ahead of time, perhaps the group could go out and have a view as Deputy Reed Benson has suggested, and then if council was aware of it as well too, when they were out in the different part of the counties, they could look at it as well, and then it just gives everybody a better background. So maybe that's a suggestion.
Yeah, maybe, and you know, it is difficult, and you know, we try to be objective, but there's always some subjectivity to it, and you know, all the councillors know their own areas probably better than any staff do, and you know, maybe there's merit to having more involvement rather than just as we're doing now, bringing forth a staff recommendation that we've, you know, done to the best of our abilities, recognizing that you know, maybe it's not as wholesome or thorough a process as it could be or council would like to see.
Okay, any other discussion? Steve?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate all the work that the committee does to go through all the applications and grade them. So I will move that County Council approves the following recommended funding allocations for projects as recommended by administration as part of the 2019 Community Grant Program. And that would be the presented list that we have in front of us.
Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, call for the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are we on the track plan? Yeah.
That one on the left is a really short chair.
It can be raised, it just slowly lowers.
It does? Oh, okay. I'm too short. Hello?
Sorry, page 84 to 99.
So, as you know, as council's aware, council and senior management team met in January to go over the strategic plan. We had a 3-day session or 2.5-day session, and we worked on visioning exercise. This is the draft strategic plan that came out of that exercise. We brought it forward in April of this year, and council requested a little bit more time to review and to look at the strategic plan. So I have received some comments back, and the comments are that under vibrant and growing economy, renewable energy, this was an area that we needed to flesh out a little further. And I think one of the specific areas was solar panels. And as we know, the planner has brought us different opportunities to look at how to deal with solar panels, and that's in progress right now. I think further we should look at how we're going to address that, because there still is a disconnect, not a disconnect, but the challenge about keeping good irrigated agricultural land protected, but at the same time trying to balance getting in different businesses. So that's an ongoing challenge that we have to look at. Water and wastewater, these are two key factors we need to deal with. We are working on it. Are we making headway? The Reeve and I just met with the Minister of Transportation, and the application that we have on for the Highway 3 corridor, the wastewater application, is still stalled. We'll push a little farther to see if we can get any traction. Unfortunately, the current government, the provincial government, is putting everything on hold right now, so we're all in the same boat. But we do have to look at alternatives and other ways and different ways of funding as well, if that's not going to come forward. Under outstanding quality of life, potable water obviously is a big one, and you know those have been coming forward with the water co-ops, and we're looking at that in terms, and everybody to have safe potable water. So I won't go through the whole strategic plan again, unless you really want me to, but if there's any questions.
Again?
Just one, like on the values, like we, in our plans to work here, we value the staff and the citizens. How come we took staff up?
Where's that, Ken, sorry?
On
The back page on an handout?
Yep.
So,
the top, that there, 2018 strategic plan, staff and citizens. And then, so you're missing staff, accountability, and citizens. Did we take that out?
I'm not sure what page you're on, sorry.
Comparing to the 28.
Oh.
Yeah.
I think, I don't know what the difference is. I think because this is a staff and council strategic plan, I'm not sure why we didn't put it in. We can certainly put it back in if you tell me which area you're looking at.
okay, page 90.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. If I remember from the discussion from the consultants, it was that the values that we had listed, not that they're not good things to value, but they wanted more kind of, more holistic values such as listening, communication, fiscal sustainability. They didn't want to be very specific, they just wanted them to be very overarching kind of values. They said the values we had listed on our old plan weren't typical values, they were different, I guess.
Does that answer your question? Deputy Reeve Benson, I finally got it right.
Yeah, because they've got the citizens in there, and a lot of them listening, but I don't see staff.
But I think it's our values as a whole, as an organization, more than, you know, I think that's why we're including all of us together. Because it's all of our strategic plan. Council's setting it, yes, but we're all in it together.
Right, I understand
Any other questions?
Well,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is, how we're faring into our strategic plan? Are we basically on top of it? Are we getting there, or where are we?
Well, we haven't approved it yet, so we haven't started working on it.
No, but.
No, but we
No,
are.
no, that's just for, we had one last year too,
Yeah.
before you were here, and,
Yeah.
and that's what I mean. Are we on top of it, or are we, kind of drifting aside once in a while? What is the scope?
Thank you, Councillor Zeenstra. Unfortunately, there's still some outstanding things that are left over from the 2018 strategic plan, and I think an update was brought forward a few months ago, and we'll have another one in August or September to finish off that strategic plan. With regards to this one, it does pair with the goals and objectives that Council and myself put in place when I first got here. Are we on track? Generally, yes, we are on track. But once we put this in place, then I will do a corporate document, and all the work plans will flow out of that corporate document. So once this is passed, we are doing what Council intended, but once we have this in place, then we can do the corporate document, corporate master plan.
So my question is, you've got it listed as 19, 20, and going up to 2022. Are you not we're not sort of planning on doing some sort of planning sessions in between then and now?
Oh, absolutely. That was one of Council's concerns, is that there was a yearly strategic planning retreat, and some members of Council felt that it was too long of a period in between, and I agree. We agreed, I think at the last April meeting, that we would meet yearly to discuss if we were on track with this plan, and if not, how to get back on track, and if we still had the same visioning. Because really a strategic planning document is just a living, breathing document, and there should be a yearly check-in, so absolutely.
I guess my concern is, like, would you have a 2-day session every year to delve into this, or is this, like, I'm not quite sure where it's going, because the length of the title is too long a time frame almost for a strategic document for me.
What do you mean the length of the title?
Well, like, in the past, it's only been for a year.
Yeah. Well, what it is it's normal practice to set it for the term of council, so that it gives you an opportunity to set your goals early on in your council term of what you want to accomplish, and then you do the yearly check-in to see where you're at and how it's going.
I'm not sure that really allows you the opportunity to make the corrections that may or may not be necessary. Like, sometimes things change so drastically. I hate to see it tied to a 4-year plan and not have the ability to change, kind of.
So you don't think the yearly check-in, which is exactly what you guys were doing previously, it would be the same, it would be very similar, it would be taking the strategic plan, reviewing it. Also, it would become forward quarterly once this is adopted, there'd be quarterly updates. This is where we are at, this is where we're going. So council would be quite aware of where we were at with the strategic plan. So as you said, as it got off track, or if it did, or if something changed drastically, that would give us ample time to correct it, revisit it. You know, we're not married to the once a year, we can meet more if that's needed.
Well, I guess the way to me it sounds is it's going to be a 4-year plan, and I don't see that kind of almost appears like we're eliminating getting together once or twice a year to have a discussion about it. It's kind of the feeling I get from the way it's titled.
It's just a title, and like I said, it's just a visioning document to set council's vision so that staff has an idea of how to move forward. And because now we do 5 to 10 year budgeting, having a longer visioning document will help us plan for the future. Doesn't mean that we're married to everything and nothing's written in stone. It's just a guiding document. And as you know, I've met with council yearly to talk about goals and objectives, and that forms a big part of this visioning document too. So, I mean, it's an overarching document. It's something that we work with, and we tie back to when we're doing budgeting. But once the corporate plan is put into place, that will be a yearly check-in as well with that too. So I think the title, if that's the concern, it'll give council the opportunity to see what you've accomplished over the 4 years. We can report back to the stakeholders. Here were your goals and objectives that you set out for the term, and here's what you accomplished along the way. So I don't think anything is really changing, except for this visioning document is longer than what you were used to with regards to implementing, and everything's going to stay the same, the yearly planning session, the quarterly updates. So I think that's the only difference.
It's still a good thing to do.
You're checking, yeah. I agree.
I'm not saying it's not a good idea to check in, I'm just concerned that, to me, it sounds like you limited your ability to change things by just making a title that expands it over 4 years, that's all I'm saying.
Absolutely, no, we don't, we're not, nothing's written in stone. It's like I keep saying, I know I keep repeating myself, but it is a living document. We have to check it all the time. Is it working? Have our visions changed? And like you said, Chair Hickey, it's very clear, things change, economies change, different things happen, and we always constantly have to look at where we're going and maybe change the direction from time to time. That happens all the time.
Any other questions or discussion?
But it's almost like the budget. If you do a 5-year budget, every year you go through the whole thing, make sure that, because every 6 months or 3 months, you don't know. That's not enough time. But with the 20, 21, 22, it's okay, but it's the same thing after a year. Just have a retreat and go over what's changed and stuff, because it's hard to predict the weather, and that's most of the time is what is the problem, stuff like that. We should just look at it, just to make sure that we're,
So that's why we're calling it a living document.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a good analogy, Deputy Reed Benson, is that similar to the budget document, it's kind of down the road, but we're always checking in and revisiting it.
still get the same amount.
Exactly.
So with your wishes,
I'll, you do, because you got it right on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. I know that between our workshop is with senior staff and council and yourself and the group that you brought in, I think there was a lot of work that went into that. I know there's been a lot of work that has gone into it since. I think we're still a little bit maybe divided on a few things, but I think at the heart of it, I think that it's important that you as the administrator, you have a vision for what we as council want, and I think that this will, you know, you have an idea of where to go, and that's the most important thing. From what grows from this is those corporate plans that you spoke of and work plans, and I think that's where we're really gonna see the rubber hit the road. So I would like to make the motion that county council adopt the 2019 to 2022 strategic plan.
any other discussion? I'm gonna call for the question. All those in favor? Those opposed? Carried.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ann.
Thank you, Lawrence.
I just use, I said you can do it too.
Yeah, out of the house.
Everybody,
Any other ones?
well, said that everybody.
So we're done, you're done everything else.
Okay, so we need a motion then to go into closed session.
Vote,